Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto took over Orochimaru's operations and used his research to create the perfect harem of shinobi? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Serpent's Empty Throne. The air in the land of sound tasted of dust and regret. It was a thin, sterile sort of air, lacking the rich, loamy scent of Konoha's forests or the crisp brine of the sea. Naruto Uzumaki breathed it in, letting the grit settle in his lungs. It felt appropriate. He stood on a barren ridge overlooking a deep, shadow-choked canyon, the setting sun painting the rock formations in hues of blood and rust. Below, nestled cunningly into the canyon wall and hidden by a subtle genjutsu shimmer, was the entrance to one of Orochimaru's main northern hideouts. A place of horrors, the stories said. A place of forbidden knowledge. A place of opportunity. He wore no Konoha headband. The simple black trousers and form-fitting dark orange shirt were practical, anonymous. The only hint of his past was the Uzumaki spiral tattooed on his shoulder, a defiant splash of red against his sun-kissed skin. Months had passed since the war, months of empty celebrations, hollow speeches, and the gnawing, bitter truth that nothing had truly changed. The system that created Nagato, that drove Obito to madness, that allowed Danzo to fester in the shadows, it was all still there. Papered over with treaties and handshakes. He had seen the ultimate expression of power in Kagaya, and the ultimate failure of ideals in the endless cycle of death. The world didn't need a savior who could talk his enemies into submission. It needed a new foundation, built on power so absolute it could enforce peace. And the blueprint for that power lay buried in the serpent's dens. Naruto closed his eyes, sinking into the natural energy around him. The sage markings, perfect and sharp, materialized around his eyes. The world resolved itself into a tapestry of chakra signatures. The genjutsu covering the entrance was a complex weave, designed to misdirect the senses and lull intruders into a false sense of security. Amateurs would walk right past it. Shinobi might notice an anomaly but would be unable to pinpoint it. To him, it glowed like a tear in the fabric of reality. He saw the intricate network of seals powering it, the flow of chakra from a geothermal vent deep within the earth. He didn't dispel it. That would be an alarm bell. Instead, he reached out with his own chakra, a delicate, precise touch that was a universe away from the sledgehammer force of a Rasengan. He found the central locking seal, a nasty piece of work designed to incinerate anyone who tampered with it. He traced its pathways, understood its logic. It was like listening to a language he was born to speak. With a mental nudge, he inserted a feedback loop into the sequence. The alarm would report nothing but normalcy. A second nudge, and the massive stone door slid inward with a barely audible whisper of grinding rock. The air that wafted out was cold and smelled of ozone and antiseptic. He slipped inside, the stone ceiling behind him as if he were never there. The corridor was long, lit by eerie, glowing fungi pulsing with a soft, blue light. He could feel the thrum of activity deep within the mountain. 4 distinct chakra signatures, Orochimaru's remnants, loyalists, or perhaps just prisoners who didn't know their master was gone. It didn't matter. He moved with a liquid grace that was more Kurama than human, his footsteps making no sound. He was a shadow flowing through a tomb. The first sentry was a man with slicked back hair and the vacant eyes of a fanatic. He sat at a console, watching a series of monitors displaying the exterior of the base. Naruto was a flicker in his peripheral vision. A sudden spike of pressure at the base of his neck, and then darkness. The man slumped forward onto his console without a sound. Naruto continued deeper, entering a cavernous laboratory. Vials of viscous liquids bubbled over arcane flames. Discarded scrolls and complex diagrams littered massive workbenches. In the center of the room, a massive glass cylinder held a grotesque creature suspended in green fluid, a failed experiment, all muscle and teeth and misplaced limbs. 2 more of Orochimaru's followers were here, arguing in low voices. Kishin is late, one of them, a stout man with a heavily scarred face, grumbled. He was supposed to relieve Kenji an hour ago. Probably lost track of time dissecting that corpse we brought in. The other, a tall, gaunt woman, replied with a sneer. He has Lord Orochimaru's passion, if not his genius. Lord Orochimaru will return, Scarface said, his voice a low chant of faith. He is eternal. We must keep the laboratories active for his glorious reappearance. Naruto emerged from the shadows behind a stack of specimen tanks. He's not coming back, he said, his voice calm and even. They spun around, kunai flashing into their hands. Their eyes widened, first in shock, then in recognition. The hero of the Fourth Great War. The Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Here, Uzumaki Naruto, the woman hissed, her body tensing. What is the meaning of this intrusion? This is the sovereign territory of Otogakure. Oto is a memory, and I'm not here to negotiate. Naruto's gaze was hard, his presence filling the vast lab. Kurama's chakra stirred beneath his skin. A low, predatory heat. This facility, and everything in it, is now under my control. Surrender, and you might live. Resist, and you'll serve as the next experiment. Scarface laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You think you can just walk in here and claim Lord Orochimaru's legacy? You are a fool. We are his chosen. We will show you true power. He slammed his hands together, and the floor rumbled. Sections of the stone floor erupted, sharp pillars of rock shooting towards Naruto from all angles. The woman blurred into motion, her hands forming a rapid series of seals. A torrent of venomous snakes, purple and black, poured from her sleeves, slithering across the floor at blinding speed. Naruto didn't move, he simply extended a hand. A small, black sphere, no bigger than a pebble, materialized in his palm, a truth-seeking orb. It expanded instantly into a defensive shell, the rock pillars shattering against its surface like glass. The snakes dissolved into puffs of smoke as they touched its perimeter. Their eyes widened in terror. That was the power of the Sage of Six Paths. The power of a god. I gave you a choice, Naruto said, his voice echoing with a chilling finality. He made a fist, and the sphere around him compressed, then shot forward, not as a ball, but as a dozen razor-sharp rods. The attack was too fast to see, too powerful to counter. The woman and the man were impaled before they could even scream. They hung in the air for a moment, pinned by the black chakra, before dissolving into dust. He felt the last chakra signature, the one they called Kishin. Deeper in the complex, he was running. Foolish. Naruto vanished in a flash of yellow, reappearing directly in Kishin's path. The man skidded to a halt, his face a mask of pure panic. He was younger than the others. Little more than a boy, with wild, terrified eyes. Please, he stammered, dropping the bloody scalpel he was holding. Don't kill me, I was just a lab assistant. I only did what I was told. Naruto looked at him, his sage mode senses perceiving the intricate web of lies and fear in the boy's chakra. He could smell the fresh blood on him, could see the cruel ambition that mimicked Orochimaru's. This wasn't a frightened follower, this was a budding monster. What were you working on? Naruto asked, his voice deceptively soft. Just tissue regeneration, Kishin stammered. Sweat beading on his forehead. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Show me. He gestured with his head, and the terrified assistant led him back to a smaller, more gruesome lab. On a steel table lay the flayed corpse of a traveler. Kishin had been meticulously removing the man's adrenal glands, comparing them to charts on a nearby wall. Research into enhancing combat reflexes through chemical stimulation. An old project of Orochimaru's. You have his ambition, Naruto noted, circling the table. You enjoy the work. Kishin started to deny it, but the words died in his throat. He saw the cold, hard certainty in Naruto's eyes. There was no talking his way out of this. In a final, desperate act, he lunged for a syringe on a nearby tray, filled with a shimmering green liquid. Before his fingers could close around it, a chakra chain, brilliant gold and shimmering with power, erupted from Naruto's back and wrapped around his wrist. It tightened, and the sound of cracking bone echoed in the sterile room. The boy screamed. I have no use for a pale imitation, Naruto said, his voice devoid of sympathy. He pulled, and the chain threw Kishin across the room, where he crumpled against the far wall, unconscious. He would be a useful source of information when he woke up. For now, the base was secure. For the next week, Naruto immersed himself in the serpent's mind. He didn't eat. He barely slept, sustaining himself with Kurama's immense chakra reserves. He moved through the vast digital and paper archives like a storm, absorbing everything. Most of it was dross, cruel, pointless experiments born of a morbid curiosity. But threaded through the madness, there was genius. Pure, terrifying, revolutionary genius. He found the complete, unredacted research on Hashirama Senju's cells. The key to incredible vitality and regeneration. He found detailed studies on every known Kekkei Genkei, complete with genetic sequencing and theories on artificial replication. He found treatises on summoning pacts, nature transformation, and the creation of artificial life. And then he found the vault. Behind a door sealed with a blood lock keyed to Orochimaru's specific chakra signature. A lock Naruto bypassed by using a transformation jutsu, and a sample of Orochimaru's blood he'd found in a cryogenic vial, was the Sannin's most treasured and forbidden work. Here were the true secrets of his immortality jutsu. Here was the perfected formula for the cursed seal, with notes on how to control its influence completely. And here, in a scroll bound in human skin, was the complete methodology for the Edo Tensei. Naruto unrolled it carefully. He had seen this jutsu used to devastating effect. It was an abomination, a defilement of the dead, forcing souls back into impure bodies to be used as puppets. Kabuto's use of it had nearly destroyed the world. But as Naruto read Orochimaru's elegant, amoral script, he saw what the Sannin had been working towards. Orochimaru hadn't seen it as a simple reanimation jutsu. He saw it as a flawed prototype for true resurrection. The primary issue was the vessel. A living sacrifice was required to bind the soul to a body of enchanted dust and dirt. The result was a pale imitation of life, a corpse with cracks running through its skin, its will shackled to the summoner. But Orochimaru had theorized a way around it. By combining the soul-binding principles of the Edo Tensei with the life-giving properties of Hashirama's cells and the body creation techniques used to craft white zetsu, one could theoretically create a perfect, living clone of the deceased. A true body, not a walking corpse. The soul could then be anchored to it, not as a prisoner, but as its rightful owner. Free will, true life, a second chance. A plan began to form in his mind. Audacious and terrible and brilliant. He wouldn't be a Hokage, begging other leaders for peace. He would build a new power, a new village, a new family. One loyal not to a nation or a memory, but to him and his vision. He would need a foundation, an inner circle. People with unique abilities, who understood what it was to be used and cast aside by the world. People who would not flinch from the hard choices that lay ahead. His mind flashed to the sound for Orochimaru's elite bodyguards, sacrificed for his goals, their potential wasted. One, in particular, stood out. The master of sound genjutsu. Chiyuya, arrogant, foul-mouthed, and fiercely powerful. Her DNA was on file in Konoha's archives, collected from the battlefield where she fell. The decision was made in an instant. Getting the sample was insultingly easy. A quick trip back to Konoha under the cover of darkness, a brief infiltration of the archives. The security was a joke to a man of his current skill level, and he was back in the lab before sunrise. He began the preparations immediately, following Orochimaru's theories and adding his own Uzumaki insights on sealing and soul manipulation. He wouldn't use a living sacrifice. He would use his own chakra, vast as an ocean, to fuel the process. He spent 3 days creating the vessel, a swirling mass of zetsu material and Hashirama's cells, suspended in a massive incubation cylinder. He meticulously sculpted it with the genetic information, shaping a perfect, living replica of the red-haired kunoichi. Finally, it was time. He laid the DNA sample on a complex seal array he'd painted on the floor. He bit his thumb, smearing his own blood across the seals. The air grew heavy, charged with an unnatural energy. Edo Tensei, Kanzen Seisei, impure world reincarnation, perfect resurrection. He intoned, slamming his palms onto the array. The seals flared with an blinding white light. A column of energy shot from the array into the incubation cylinder. The cloned body convulsed violently. Naruto poured his chakra into the jutsu, feeling the immense drain, the technique pulling on not just his own energy, but Kurama's as well. From the ether, he felt a soul being drawn back, a consciousness pulled from the pure land. It was a fierce, defiant soul, kicking and screaming against the summons. He focused his will, not as a jailer, but as an anchor, offering a vessel instead of a prison. For a moment, it felt like the jutsu would tear itself apart. Then, with a sudden lurch, the soul slammed into the body. The light died down, the fluid in the cylinder drained away, and the body inside slumped against the glass, steam rising from its flawless skin. It was her, Chiyuya, not a cracked and gray parody, but her. Alive. He opened the cylinder, and she collapsed onto the floor. Sputtering and coughing, she pushed herself up, looking at her hands, her arms. Her skin was warm. She could feel the cold stone beneath her palms. She looked up at him, her wild brown eyes filled with a furious confusion. What the hell is this? She rasped, her voice raw. Where am I? This isn't the Pure Land. It's not, Naruto said, standing a respectful distance away. It's a second chance. She scrambled to her feet, her body still weak but instinct taking over. She fell into a defensive stance, scanning the lab. I remember you and that lazy bastard Shikamaru. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Is this some kind of sick joke? Did you reanimate me to be your puppet? If you were a puppet, you wouldn't be able to ask that question, he pointed out calmly. You have your own will. Your own body. It's as real as mine. Chiyuya scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. She spat on the floor. Don't screw with me, asshole. Nobody comes back. What do you want? Revenge. Information. I want to offer you a position, Naruto said, his gaze unwavering. Orochimaru wasted your talent. He saw you as a tool, a container for his soul. I see a powerful kunoichi, a master of genjutsu whose potential was never fully realized. She stared at him, bewildered. This was not the idiotic, loud-mouthed genin she remembered. This man was different. The power rolling off him was immense, suffocating. He stood with the relaxed posture of a predator that knows it has no equal in the room. His eyes were ancient, holding a depth of knowledge and resolve that didn't belong on his face. A position doing what? She asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Changing the world, he said simply. The great nations are doomed to repeat their mistakes. Their peace is an scion that will shatter the moment a new threat appears. I'm building something new, a force loyal to a better ideal. A place where power like yours is respected, not feared or used. I'm offering you the chance to be a founding member. Chiyuya was silent for a long time, circling him, studying him. She could feel the life thrumming in her veins, the strength returning to her muscles. It was real. This was all real. And if I say no, then you're free to walk out that door, Naruto replied with a shrug. I won't stop you, but the world thinks you're dead. You'll be a ghost, hunted by every nation for your past crimes. Here, you can have a future. He paused, his expression turning serious. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. You're a shinobi. You know a good offer when you hear one. Her mind raced. He was right. Walking out meant a life on the run, a life of hiding and scavenging. Staying here, it was a gamble. But this man, this new Naruto Uzumaki, was intriguing. The sheer audacity of his plan appealed to her. I need my flute, she said finally, her tone demanding. Naruto smiled faintly. I was hoping you'd say that. He gestured to a nearby workbench. Lying on a velvet cloth was her demonic flute, painstakingly recovered and restored. As Chiyuya tentatively picked up her instrument, a new resolve hardening in her eyes, Naruto was already thinking of his next move. His new organization would need a spymaster, an infiltrator. Someone who knew Orochimaru's methods, his networks, his poisons. Someone who understood what it meant to be branded, used, and discarded by a master. His thoughts settled on Anko Mitarashi. He found her a few days later, not in a Konoha training ground or an Anbu facility, but in a dingy, third-rate dango shop on the outskirts of the village. She was drowning her days in sweet snacks and cheap sake, her jonin flak jacket looking worn and out of place. Her eyes, once filled with a wild, chaotic fire, were dull. The cursed seal on her neck, a faint trio of tomo, was a constant reminder of a past she couldn't escape. She was a hero of the war, but she was also Orochimaru's former apprentice. A living relic, a source of mistrust. He sat down opposite her, ordering nothing. She glanced up, a flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by a tired apathy. Uzumaki, she slurred slightly. Come to lecture me on the will of fire. Save your breath. I'm not here to lecture, Naruto said, his voice low. I'm here to make you an offer. Not interested, she said, biting into a dango stick with unnecessary force. I've taken over Orochimaru's northern hideout, he continued, ignoring her dismissal. All of his research, all of his assets, that got her attention. She slowly lowered her dango, her eyes narrowing. What? He's gone for good this time. I made sure of it. But his legacy remains. A network of spies, hidden labs, stockpiles of weapons and data. It's a snake with its head cut off. But the body is still twitching. It needs a new mind to guide it. Anko stared at him, her mind slowly cutting through the fog of alcohol. And you think that's you? She scoffed. You, Konoha's #1 knucklehead. What are you going to do? Talk all his old experiments into becoming good guys? Something like that, Naruto said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who knows the serpent's playbook. Someone who can navigate his web of secrets and turn his own weapons against the world he sought to corrupt. I need you, Anko. She was stunned into silence. No one had needed her for years. She was a tool to be pointed at a target, a pariah to be watched. He wasn't offering her a mission. He was offering her the keys to her abuser's kingdom. Why? She finally managed to ask. Her voice barely a whisper. Why me? Because you survived him, Naruto said, his gaze piercing, leaving no room for doubt. You carry his mark, but you never broke. That's a strength I respect. I'm not offering you a chance to forget your past, Anko. I'm offering you a chance to weaponize it. A chance to dismantle everything he built, piece by piece, and use the scraps to forge something better. Something that belongs to you. He leaned forward slightly. I'm offering you revenge. And a purpose. Anko's hand trembled, the dango stick falling from her fingers. Purpose. The word echoed in the empty spaces of her soul. She looked at the boy. No, the man, across from her. He was offering her the one thing she craved more than anything else. A chance to finally, truly be Free of Orochimaru's shadow by consuming it entirely. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips, the first genuine smile she'd worn in years. The old fire was back in her eyes. All right, brat, she said, her voice dripping with a newfound, venomous excitement. You've got my attention. Show me what you've built. Back in the northern hideout, Naruto led a newly committed Anko and a still skepti. Cal to Yuya deeper into the facility than he had gone before. He brought them to a massive, reinforced blast door at the very core of the mountain. He channeled his chakra into the locking mechanism, and the great door groaned open, revealing a cavern so vast it had its own atmosphere. And in the center of it, sleeping, was the serpent's magnum opus. It was a colossal, biomechanical monstrosity, easily the size of the Gedo Mazo. Its body was a fusion of living flesh, dark metal, and glowing blue seals. Wires as thick as pythons snaked from its dormant form into the cavern walls, drawing power from the geothermal core of the mountain. It was a blank slate, an engine of unimaginable power, left unfinished by its creator. A synthetic-tailed beast, an artificial god, Anko gasped. Chiyuya's foul-mouthed arrogance fell away, replaced by pure awe. This, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, is the beginning. This is the vessel for our will. The great nations have their Jinchuriki and their traditions. We will have this. We will build a new power, a new home, and a new world, starting right here. He looked at the two women beside him, his first recruits. A disgraced Jonin and a resurrected ghost. The foundation of his new order. It was a start. Far away, in the cold, dead vacuum of space, a pale figure drifted silently in the void between worlds. His white robes were immaculate, his skin the color of bone, and on his forehead, a third eye blinked open, its gaze piercing through dimensions. He had felt it, a tremor in the fabric of reality, the improper use of life and death, the sudden, blossoming chakra of a resurrected soul. It was a faint signature, but it was blasphemy all the same. The laws of the Otsutsuki had been violated on the small, green and blue world they called Earth. A seed of corruption had been planted, and it would need to be purged. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Crimson Tide and the Seven-Tailed Scarab. The rhythm of life in the serpent's den was one of quiet, focused industry. The vast, cold halls began to feel less like a tomb and more like a workshop. Anko, with a predatory glee that was unsettling and deeply effective, had taken end to her task like a fish returned to water. She moved through Orochimaru's encrypted networks and hidden ledgers, not as an intruder, but as an heir. She cross-referenced old contacts, activated dormant spy cells, and compiled a staggering map of her former master's shadow empire. She worked with a quiet, obsessive fury, often for days at a time, surrounded by scrolls and glowing interface screens. A half-eaten bowl of dango her only companion. It was, Naruto knew, a form of exorcism. Tayuya, on the other hand, prowled the base with a restless energy. Her new body was a marvel. It was stronger, faster, and had a chakra capacity that dwarfed her original form, a direct benefit of the Hashirama cells woven into her matrix. She spent hours in the cavernous training halls, the haunting, disco, ardent melodies of her flute echoing through the stone. She was testing her limits, pushing her sound-based genjutsu into territories she had only dreamed of. The illusions she could now weave were tangible, capable of fooling not just the mind but the body as well, inflicting phantom wounds that felt brutally real. There was a grudging respect growing in her eyes when she looked at Naruto. He had given her not just life, but power. And to Tayuya, power was the only currency that mattered. Their interactions were terse, clipped. Anko would slide a data scroll onto a table as Naruto worked, offering a quiet intel on a contraband shipping route in the land of waves. Could be useful, before disappearing back into her digital web. Tayuya would challenge him to spars, her music a furious assault against his senses. Her insults as sharp as ever. "You're still soft, Uzumaki." She'd spit after he'd effortlessly sidestepped an illusionary beast that would have mentally crippled a seasoned jonin. But it lacked its former venom. It was a test, a constant gauging of his strength, and each time he proved her superior, her loyalty solidified, not out of fear, but out of a shinobi's pragmatic respect for the top of the food chain. Naruto himself was the calm center of this burgeoning storm. He spent his time not just training, but studying. He was dissecting the biomechanical titan in the main cavern. The project Orochimaru had called the Vessel of the Dragon God. It was a masterpiece of genetic engineering and forbidden sealing arts, but it was incomplete, a body without a soul or a mind. It needed a sophisticated control system, a way to channel its immense power without it going berserk. More than that, it needed a constant, delicate touch to manage its cellular stability. It was an organism as much as a machine. "It's degrading," he said one evening, standing before the colossal, dormant form with Anko. "The cellular regeneration isn't keeping pace with the inert state's energy consumption." Orochimaru had it linked to a series of juvenile test subjects, using their life force to keep it stable. "I've disconnected them, but the decay is accelerating." Anko peered at a diagnostic seal Naruto had placed on the Titan's metallic hide. The light was pulsing with a sickly yellow. "So we need a battery. Or a damn good doctor." "I need a specialist," Naruto corrected. One with sensory abilities precise enough to monitor its entire chakra network, and medical knowledge advanced enough to treat cellular decay on a massive scale. A sensor and a medic rolled into one. Anko's eyes lit up with a dark spark of recognition. "I know someone," she said, a cruel smile touching her lips. Orochimaru had a pet project. An Uzumaki girl. Found her in a village he'd destroyed. Her healing abilities were potent. You bite her, you heal. He kept her close, used her like a walking, talking first aid kit. Naruto's jaw tightened. He knew the stories of his clan's unique life force. Where is she? After the war, with Sasuke gone and Orochimaru dead, she was adrift. My contacts tracked her to Kusagakure. Not the village proper, but a small, fortified settlement on its border called Kusa no Mori. The place is run by a man named Kido Sumiki, a former jonin with a messiah complex. He took her in. Anko tapped a finger on the railing. He protects her. And in return, his shinobi forces have the fastest recovery rate in the world. He's made her a goddess, and a prisoner. The name echoed in Naruto's mind. Karen, the red-haired girl from Sasuke's team Taka. He embeared her fierce devotion to a man who had tried to kill her. A devotion born of desperation. Get to Yuya. Naruto said, his voice flat and cold. We're taking a trip to the land of grass. Kusa no M. Ori was less a village and more a fortress carved into a dense bamboo forest. Its shinobi wore masks of carved wood and moved with a silent, coordinated grace. Naruto and Tayuya watched them from the upper branches of the thicket. Hidden by a simple but effective visual distortion jutsu. A lot of guards for a peaceful little sanctuary, Tayuya muttered, her fingers drumming restlessly on her flute. They're not guards. They're keepers, Naruto replied, his sage mode active. He could feel the flow of chakra in the village. It was a closed loop. The shinobi would go on missions, return wounded. And their chakra would be replenished by a single, massive source at the center of the village. A source that felt strained, frayed at the edges, like a beacon burning too brightly. He could feel Karen's life force, vibrant and strong, but stretched thin, being drawn from in 100 different directions. They didn't launch a frontal assault. That would only put Karen in danger. Instead, they waited for nightfall. Naruto created a single, perfect shadow clone and sent it to create a diversion, a series of minor explosions at the village's food stores. As the bulk of the guards rushed to investigate the attack, Naruto and Tayuya slipped over the walls like ghosts. The central building was a large, elegantly designed pagoda. Inside, they found Karen. She was in a pristine white room that looked more like a shrine than a laboratory. She sat on a silk cushion, her arms covered in bite marks, fresh and old. A line of wounded Kusa ninja knelt before her, one by one, biting her arm, there. Wounds knitting shut with a faint red glow. At the head of the room, on a raised platform, sat Kido Sumiki. He was a handsome man with kind eyes and a gentle smile that didn't reach them. Thank you, Lady Karen, each ninja would murmur, bowing their head in reverence before departing. Your boundless compassion is the lifeblood of our village, my dear, Kido said, his voice smooth as honey. You are our salvation. Karen gave a weak, tired smile. I am happy to help, Master Kido. Naruto felt a surge of cold fury. This was a different kind of prison than Orochimaru's labs, but it was a prison all the same. One built of gratitude and emotional manipulation. He and Tayuya dropped from the rafters, landing silently in the center of the room. The last of the wounded ninja yelped in surprise, reaching for a kunai. Tayuya brought her flute to her lips and played a single, sharp note. The man froze, his eyes glazing over, before he quietly turned and walked out of the room, shutting the door behind him. Kido's kind expression vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. Who dares defile this sacred space? Karen gasped, her eyes widening in recognition. Naruto. Hello, Karen, Naruto said, his voice gentle. He ignored Kido, his focus entirely on her. I'm here to take you home. Home, she repeated, confused. This is my home. Master Kido saved me. He saved you from one cage only to put you in another. More comfortable one, Naruto said, taking a step closer. He calls you a goddess, but he treats you like a resource. And Uzumaki's life force is a gift, Karen. It's not a well for others to drink from whenever they're thirsty. You lie, Kido snarled, rising to his feet. Two massive, silent bodyguards materialized from the shadows behind his platform. She is honored here, respected, is she? Naruto's gaze flickered to her arms, to the dozens of bite marks. How often do you get to leave the village, Karen? Have you made any friends who don't need you to heal them? Does anyone here know anything about you, other than the fact you can mend their broken bodies? His words were striking home. Karen flinched, her eyes darting around the pristine, empty room. Her sacred space, her prison. He is twisting my words, Lady Karen. Kido insisted, a note of desperation in his voice. This man is a Jinchuriki, a monster. He seeks only to use you, just as Orochimaru did. Just as Sasuke Uchiha did. The name was a physical blow. Karen recoiled, a pained expression on her face. Sasuke is the past, Naruto said firmly, his voice cutting through her confusion. And I'm not asking you to serve me. I'm asking you to be my family. I'm building a place for people like us. People whose powers have made them targets. People who are tired of being used. A place for the Uzumaki to build something of their own. He held out a hand. Come with me. Not as a healer, as a leader, as an equal. Karen looked from Naruto's outstretched hand to Kito's panicked, furious face. The illusion was shattering. She saw the truth in Naruto's eyes, the genuine conviction. She saw the cage Kito had built for her, gilded with respect and worship. She stood up. "I seize them!" Kito shrieked. The two bodyguards blurred into motion. One was a massive man who swelled in size, his fists becoming like boulders. The other moved like a wraith, his hands weaving seals for a powerful wind-style jutsu. Chiyuya stepped in front of Naruto, a vicious grin on her face. "My turn," she growled. She didn't play a melody. She unleashed a scream, channeled through her flute. It was a dissonant, chaotic blast of sound and chakra that slammed into the attacking shinobi. It wasn't an illusion. It was pure, concussive sonic force. The wind-style user's jutsu was ripped apart before it could form. The giant man clutched his head, roaring in agony as blood poured from his ears. He stumbled, disoriented, and Chiyuya was on him in an instant, her flute wielded like a club, a series of precise, brutal strikes to his joints bringing him to his knees. Kito stared in horror, then turned to run. A golden chakra chain erupted from Naruto's back and wrapped around his ankle. He was yanked off his feet and dragged back across the floor, stopping at Naruto's feet. Naruto looked down at him, his eyes cold. "She is not your property." He glanced at Karen, who was watching, stunned but with a flicker of exhilaration in her eyes. He gave Kito a slight tug, pulling him into the air. "Her choice." Karen walked over, her expression hard. She looked at the man who had called her a goddess while bleeding her dry. She didn't slap him. She didn't yell. She simply took the ceremonial dagger from his own belt, cut a lock of her vibrant red hair, and dropped it on his chest. An old Uzumaki symbol for severing ties. "I am not your salvation, Kito," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am my own." With Karen now a part of their group, the dynamic shifted again. Her meticulous, almost obsessive nature was a perfect complement to Anko's chaotic genius. While Anko mapped Orochimaru's criminal empire, Karen began to map the base itself, using her sensory abilities to create a perfect, 3D-dimensional chakra map of the entire facility, including its power sources and structural weaknesses. She took over the medical labs, her eyes lighting up with an intensity that bordered on madness. As she pored over Orochimaru's research, immediately grasping concepts that would have taken others years to understand, she stabilized the vessel of the dragon god within a day, creating a symbiotic feedback loop that allowed its own latent energy to sustain it. It was Karen who provided their next objective. Orochimaru was always obsessed with the ruins of Uzushiogakure, she explained, pointing to a spot on a large map. But he could never get past the outer defenses, even in its ruined state. The whirlpools are natural, but they're enhanced by ancient seals that shred anything that aches without the right chakra signature. But I have that signature. We all do. Her gaze met Naruto's. It's our birthright. And according to Orochimaru's intelligence, it's not just ruins. A local daimyo from the Land of Fire has set up a mining operation there, tearing the island apart for its unique, chakra-conductive minerals. He has no idea what he's sitting on. The plan was simple and audacious. They would reclaim their ancestral home. The journey to the Land of Whirlpools was swift. They arrived at the coast to see a blasted, storm-racked island in the distance, surrounded by churning, violent waters. A single, heavily fortified bridge, built by the daimyo, connected it to the mainland. Their assault was a symphony of precision. Anko, using her knowledge of infiltration tactics, sabotaged the bridge's support structures, planting explosive tags set to detonate on her signal. Karen, from a high vantage point, acted as their eyes and ears, mapping the patrol routes and chakra signatures of the daimyo's forces, a mix of hired samurai and rogue shinobi. The attack began with sound. Chiyuya, hidden in the rocks near the bridge's entrance, began to play. It was a subtle, creeping melody that spread across the island. It wasn't an attack, but a powerful, wide-area illusion. The guards on patrol suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of drowsiness. The samurai found their hands feeling heavy, their minds sluggish. Communication became difficult, as words seemed to get lost on the wind. With the island's defenders disoriented, Naruto walked onto the bridge. Alone. He was the bait. As expected, alarms blared. A troop of samurai in heavy armor charged, their swords drawn. Naruto met them head-on. He didn't use Rasengans or clones. He moved through them like a force of nature, his taijutsu a blur of precise, disabling strikes. He broke swords with his bare hands, shattered armor with perfectly placed kicks. He was a whirlwind of orange and black, and in less than a minute, the entire troop lay groaning on the bridge, disarmed and disabled but, pointedly, alive. From the fortress on the island, the daimyo's prized shinobi commander, a missing nin from Iwa named Ganto, watched in disbelief. He's just one man. Fire the chakra cannons. Massive cannons, bolted onto the fortress walls, began to glow. Naruto saw them charging and simply raised a hand. 5 truth-seeking orbs materialized behind him. They shot forward, faster than the eye could see, and struck the cannons. The resulting explosions rocked the entire island. "That's my cue," Enko whispered from her position, and pressed a detonator. A series of powerful explosions ripped through the bridge's supports. The entire structure groaned, sagged, and then collapsed into the raging sea. The island was cut off. Ganto roared in frustration and leapt from the fortress wall, followed by his elite shinobi. "Kill him. The daimyo will pay a fortune." As they charged the stranded Naruto, figures emerged from the rubble and shadows around him. Chiyuya, her flute now a weapon of sonic punishment. Enko, a pair of trench knives in her hands, a sadistic grin on her face. And Karen, her adamantine chains erupting from her back. A terrifying and beautiful display of Uzumaki power. The battle was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Chiyuya's genjutsu turned the shinobi against each other. Enko was a blur of lethal motion, dispatching enemies with ruthless efficiency. Karen's chains were a whirling defense and offense, smashing through earth-style jutsu and capturing foes with ease. Naruto himself dealt with Ganto. The Iwa nin was powerful, a master of explosion release, but he was facing a demigod. Naruto simply walked through his explosions, a cloak of Kurama's chakra neutralizing the blasts, and ended the fight with a single chakra-infused punch that sent the man flying back into his own fortress wall, leaving a crater. With the daimyo's forces broken, they entered the heart of Uzushio. It was a ghost of its former glory, but even in ruin, the architecture was breathtaking. Great spiral towers lay toppled, and intricate seal patterns covered every remaining surface. In the central temple, they found what they were looking for, the Uzumaki archives. A vault, protected by a seal that responded only to a perfect fusion of multiple Uzumaki chakra signatures. It took the combined effort of Naruto and Karen. Their hands pressed against the stone, to make the great door swing open. Inside were scrolls detailing sealing techniques that would make Jiraiya's head spin. But there was something else. A chamber dedicated to the study of Jinchuriki. The Uzumaki had been the jailers of the tailed beasts for generations, and their knowledge was unparalleled. They had theories, not just on sealing, but on harmonizing with the beasts. They even had research on how to create stable, artificial Jinchuriki. An idea sparked in Naruto's mind. They had power, but they lacked versatility. They had no aerial capabilities, for one. He thought of the Jinchuriki he had known. Of Fu, the cheerful, energetic kunoichi from Taki, hostess of the Seven Tails, Chome. A flying insect. She had been killed by the Akatsuki, her potential snuffed out. She deserved a second chance. "Karen, I need your help," he said, unrolling the scroll on the Edo Tensei. "I'm bringing someone else back. Your sensory perception and life force will help stabilize the ritual. Make it cleaner, faster." This time, the process was far more elegant. In the center of the Uzumaki temple, Naruto drew the array. Chiyuya created a barrier of silent, churning sound around them, masking the energy signature from the outside world. Karen stood beside Naruto, her hand on his shoulder, pouring her own pure Uzumaki chakra into the jutsu. When Naruto slammed his hands down, the light was not blinding white, but a soft, controlled gold. The soul that answered the call was not defiant. It was bright, curious, and unafraid. It settled into the newly formed vessel with an ease that was startling. The fluid drained, and a young woman with mint-green hair and orange eyes sat up, blinking. Fu looked around the ancient temple, at the intense redhead, the scowling flutist, and the powerful blonde man who radiated warmth like the sun. She wasn't confused. She wasn't angry, she just smiled, a wide, brilliant smile. Wow, she said, her voice filled with bubbly excitement. Reincarnation, huh, cool, am I on your team? Naruto couldn't help but smile back. Her simple, earnest acceptance was a breath of fresh air. Welcome back, Fu. High above the planet, orbiting in the silent, star-dusted darkness, the pale scout of the Otsutsuki clan floated. His Byakugan had been observing the planet for days, cataloging its inhabitants, its energy sources, its primitive conflicts. He had felt the first soul being pulled back from the pure land, a faint but jarring anomaly. Now, he had felt a second. This one was stronger, brighter, and a calm, painted by a massive surge of chakra from the island below. It was a beacon in the darkness, an undeniable violation. He focused his gaze on the island, his vision penetrating stone and seal. He saw four figures standing in the ruined temple. He saw the Uzumaki spirals, the symbol of a clan with a distant, diluted connection to his own line. He saw the man at the center of it all, radiating power that was a bastardized fusion of sage energy and a tailed beast, a power that mimicked the sage of six paths. This was not a random occurrence. This was a deliberate heresy, a weed growing in one of their garden worlds. His expression, once one of bored observation, hardened into one of cold, divine purpose. He had found the source. The hunt was no longer a reconnaissance. It was an extermination. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Ghost of the Bloody Mist. The northern hideout was no longer silent. The echoing emptiness had been replaced by the sounds of construction and quiet purpose. Naruto's shadow clones, an army of tireless laborers, worked around the clock, reinforcing walls, expanding living quarters, and clearing away the last vestiges of Orochimaru's grotesque experiments. They were transforming the Serpent's Den into a nascent village, a fortress hidden from the world's prying eyes. Naruto had named it Shinsei, rebirth. The human element was what truly changed the atmosphere. Fu, with her infectious optimism, had appointed herself the unofficial morale officer. She flitted through the dark corridors, her laughter a stark contrast to the grim stone, leaving trails of her marrying scale powder in the air like pixie dust. She challenged Yuya to mock battles that often ended in draws, her blinding speed and unpredictable aerial movements a perfect counter to the flutist's area of effect genjutsu. Yuya, for her part, seemed to tolerate the newcomer's cheerfulness with a grudging acceptance, her insults becoming less venomous and more perfunctory. Karen had become the logistical and scientific heart of Shinsei. She had organized Orochimaru's chaotic archives into a meticulously cross-referenced library of forbidden knowledge. Her days were spent in the main medical lab, her face illuminated by the glow of seals and diagnostic screens, reverse engineering Orochimaru's work on cellular activation and applying it to their own training regimens. She moved with a newfound confidence, her commands sharp and precise, the timid, haunted girl from Kusuno Mori fading with each passing day. It was Anko who brought the world to their doorstep. She strode into the primary command center, formerly Orochimaru's personal study, and tossed a scroll onto the large table Naruto was using to draft architectural plans. A message, she said, her voice a low growl of satisfaction. Sent through one of Orochimaru's old, dead-drop channels. Very few people even knew this one existed. Naruto picked it up. It bore the official seal of the Mizukage of Kurigakure, but it was marked for a clandestine meeting. The message was brief, written in an elegant, flowing script. It was an invitation for the new Master of Otogakure to a private discussion. It was signed simply, Mei Terumi. The Godime Mizukage, Naruto said, a thoughtful expression on his face. She stepped down after the war, letting Chojuro take the reins. Stepped down, but didn't disappear, Anko corrected, leaning over the table. She still holds massive influence. The elders in Kiri fear her more than they do the new Mizukage. She's smart, powerful, and notoriously tired of the political games. If she's reaching out, it's not for a friendly chat. Karen, who had followed Anko in, peered at the scroll. Her brow furrowed. The chakra residue on this scroll is complex. It's hers, but it's laced with a subtle cipher seal. She's telling us the meeting is a trap. A trap she's inviting us into, Naruto mused. She's testing us. She wants to see if we're smart enough to spot it, and strong enough to handle it. Fu zipped into the room, landing lightly on the back of a chair. Ooh, a trap. Sounds fun. Can we go? Chiyuya appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. The last woman who tried to trap me ended up with her soul in a jar. Let's not be stupid. We won't be, Naruto said, his decision already made. Mei Terumi is a political heavyweight. If she's disillusioned with the current system, she could be a powerful ally. Enko, find out everything you can about the proposed meeting location. Karen, I want you to analyze the cipher. It might tell us what kind of trap we're walking into. Fu, Chiyuya, get ready for a trip. We're going to the land of water. The meeting point was an isolated archipelago of small, rocky islands in the misty waters off the main coast. It was a place known for treacherous currents and perpetual fog, a traditional meeting spot for Kiri's hunter nin. As their small, chakra-powered boat cut through the gray water, the air grew thick and heavy. The air tastes wrong, Karen said, her eyes closed in concentration. It's not just the mist. There's a trace element in the water vapor. An airborne neurotoxin, odorless, tasteless, very slow acting, designed to dull the senses and slow reaction times. It's a classic root formulation. Enko, standing at the bow, sniffed the air and nodded. Danzo's signature all over it. Amateurs. They should know an Uzumaki sensor would pick this up. They're not targeting us, Naruto surmised, his gaze fixed on the largest island, a craggy peak shrouded in mist. They're targeting Mei. They want her sluggish and off her game when they make their move. We just happened to be walking into the same kill zone. When they landed, a lone figure was waiting on the black, volcanic sand. It was Ao, the veteran Kiri Shinobi. His transplanted Byakugan covered by a formal eye patch. He gave a stiff, formal bow. Lord Naruto, Lady Mei is waiting for you at the summit. We'll find our own way up, Naruto replied. His tone polite but firm. Ao's eye narrowed slightly, but he simply nodded and stepped aside. As they began their ascent up a winding stone path, Fu took to the air, a silent green blur in the mist. A moment later, she was back. 6 signatures, hidden in the rocks above, she whispered. Wearing Kiri Hunter Nin masks, but their chakra feels blank. Emotionless. Puppets, Enko growled. Another of Root's calling cards. Probably loaded with explosives. Chiyuya, Naruto said. The flutist nodded. She brought her instrument to her lips and played a low, throbbing note that was barely audible to human ears. It traveled through the rock, a wave of pure sound. A few seconds later, 6 faint thuds echoed from the cliffs above as 6 bodies slumped to the ground, caught in a powerful sleep genjutsu. Show-offs, Enko muttered, but there was a hint of approval in her voice. They found Mei Terumi in a small, ancient pavilion at the very peak of the island. She sat gracefully at a low stone table, a steaming tea set before her. The former Mizukage was as beautiful and imposing as the stories claimed, her long auburn hair braided intricately, her green eyes sharp and intelligent. Her faithful bodyguard, Chojuro, stood nervously behind her, his hand resting on the hilt of his twin sword, the Haramakare. Naruto Uzumaki, Mei said, her voice a sultry, melodic purr. You've certainly grown. I trust your journey wasn't too taxing. Her eyes flickered with amusement, a clear sign that she knew exactly what they had just walked through. The air is a little stale, but the scenery is nice. Naruto replied, taking a seat opposite her. His team fanned out, taking up defensive positions at the edge of the pavilion, their senses on high alert. Mei smiled, a dangerous, captivating expression. Straight to the point, then. I've been hearing whispers. A new power rising in the ruins of Otogakure. A leader with the power of a god and the ambition of a demon. Some say you're the second coming of Madara Uchiha. Others say you're finishing what Orochimaru started. I'd like to hear your version. Madara wanted to force a dream on the world. Orochimaru wanted to consume it for his own immortality. Naruto said, his voice calm and steady. I want to give it a chance to start over. The 5 great nations are shackled by their own history. They talk of peace, but they hoard power, spy on their allies, and train children for war. The peace we have now is a bandage on a festering wound. It won't last. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I saw your work as Mizukage, Mei. You tried to reform Kiri, to drag it out of the bloody mist and into the light. But you were fighting against a century of tradition, against conservative elders who feared change more than they feared destruction. You won battles, but you were losing the war. That's why you stepped down. You were tired of patching a rotten ship. Mei's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He had seen right through her. I'm not building another hidden village to play the same games, Naruto continued. I'm building a scalpel to cut the rot out. A sanctuary for those the world has cast aside. And a military force strong enough to make the other nations listen. Not through conquest, but through the undeniable argument of absolute power. Chojuro shifted uncomfortably. That sounds like a declaration of war. It's a declaration of intent, Naruto corrected. We will be the world's immune system. When a threat like the Akatsuki rises, we won't debate it in a cage summit for months. We will eliminate it. Mei studied him, her expression unreadable. She tapped a long, elegant finger on the table. A bold, arrogant plan. And one that requires immense resources and political capital, neither of which you have. She gestured to the teapot. Tea. No, thank you, Karen said sharply from the edge of the pavilion. It's poisoned. Mei raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting to Karen. Is it now? A tasteless alkaloid, Karen elaborated, her eyes narrowed. Root origin. Designed to react with your specific chakra type, Mei. It would have simulated the onset of a stroke. In the ensuing chaos, the assassins would strike. Mei's dangerous smile returned, this time with a genuine, chilling edge. It seems my disgruntled political opponents have grown impatient. And sloppy. She looked back at Naruto. You have a very talented censor. I have a very talented family, Naruto replied. As if on cue, the mist thickened, swirling around the pavilion with an unnatural speed. The world was reduced to a few feet of visibility. A classic Kurigakure jutsu, hidden mist jutsu, Chojuro stammered, drawing his massive sword as it began to glow with blue chakra. It's an ambush. Breathe, a voice hissed from the mist, seeming to come from all directions at once. Fu, however, just giggled. No, you breathe. She clapped her hands together, releasing a dense cloud of her shimmering green scale powder. It was a fine, almost invisible dust that spread through the air, carried by her chakra. The effect was instantaneous. The thick, chakra-infused mist began to dissipate, torn apart by the reactive properties of Fu's scales. Visibility returned in a matter of seconds, revealing a dozen figures in the classic Anbu-style armor of Root, their blank masks seeming to stare from the mist's tattered edges. One of them, clearly the leader, cursed under his breath. The Jinchuriki. How? He didn't get to finish. Chiyuya played a sharp, piercing chord on her flute. The sound wasn't an illusion. It was a targeted sonic lance. The Root leader screamed, clutching his head as the world around him distorted into a nightmare landscape, his own senses turned against him. He began lashing out wildly with his tanto, slashing at his own comrades. The others charged. Anko met them head-on, a blur of motion. She moved with a brutal, terrifying efficiency that was pure Root methodology turned back on itself. She didn't fight them. She dismantled them, her trench knives finding gaps in their armor, severing tendons, and ending lives with a cold, practiced economy of motion. A Root agent managed to slip past the melee, his body flickering as he used a high-speed movement technique, aiming for Mei. Before Chojuro could even fully raise his blade, a golden chain shot out from behind Naruto and wrapped around the agent's torso, slamming him into the ground with enough force to crack the stone. The fight was over in less than 30 seconds. The remaining Root agents lay dead or dying, victims of their own twisted tactics. Naruto stood up, walking over to the captured agent, who was struggling against Karen's adamantine chain. Who is your commander? He asked, his voice low and demanding. The agent just glared, his mouth set in a defiant line. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth. Cyanide pill in a false tooth, Anko grunted, kicking one of the corpses. Fanatics, the lot of them. Danzo's legacy is a stubborn weed. She looked towards Ao. They knew exactly where and when this meeting was happening. There was a leak. Everyone's gaze fell on Ao. The old shinobi stiffened, his expression grim. I swear on my honor as a shinobi of Kiri, I did not betray Lady Mei. I believe you, Naruto said, surprising everyone. His sage mode was active, and he could sense the truth in the man's chakra. He could also sense something else, a faint, dormant seal in the man's transplanted Byakugan. But you were compromised. When Danzo attended the first Cage Summit, he placed a subtle puppet seal within your Byakugan's casing. He's been seeing through your eye ever since. Even after his death, the seal remains, a listening post for his successor. Ao looked horrified, his hand flying to his eye patch. He had been an unwitting spy for years. Mei rose from her seat, her expression a mixture of fury and calculation. She looked at the carnage, at Naruto's composed and terrifyingly competent team. And then at Naruto himself. She saw a man who had anticipated a trap, disarmed it with contemptuous ease, and diagnosed a complex espionage problem in seconds. He wasn't a warlord. He was a force of nature with a scalpel-sharp mind. Danzo's successor calls himself Kajhane, the Shadow Wing, Anko supplied, wiping her blade clean. He's been consolidating what's left of Root. He sees himself as Konoha's true protector, and you, Naruto, as its greatest threat. He's right about one thing, Naruto said, turning back to Mei. I am a threat, to men like him, to the system that allows men like him to flourish in the shadows. Mei walked over to him, her movements fluid and deliberate. She stopped just before him, her captivating green eyes searching his. The air crackled with a palpable tension. You've made some powerful enemies, Naruto Uzumaki, she purred. The best kind. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. The 5 Cage would see you as a rogue element to be eliminated. The daimyos would see you as a threat to their authority. She paused, leaning in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I see you as the most interesting thing to happen to this world in 50 years. She stepped back. My political influence, my network of loyal shinobi in Kiri, and my knowledge of the other nation's weaknesses, they are yours. On one condition. Name it, Naruto said. Her smile widened, becoming predatory and playful. When you build your new world, make sure it's not a boring one. High above, hidden by the clouds, Hiotsutsuki's scout watched the entire exchange through his Byakugan. He saw the fight, the casual display of power. He saw the political machinations, the forging of an alliance. He had initially planned to simply descend and pass judgment, to erase this anomaly with overwhelming force. But he saw now that would be crude. This Naruto Uzumaki wasn't just a fighter. He was a symbol, a charismatic leader attracting other powerful, disaffected pieces to his banner. To simply kill him would be to make him a martyr. It might even galvanize these primitive nations against a common, celestial foe. No, the proper way to deal with a weed was to pull it out by the roots, to sever its connections until it withered and died alone. He would observe, he would learn the structure of this fledgling power base. And then, he would dismantle it, piece by piece, before the man at its center even knew he was at war. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The root of the problem. The return to Shinsei was different. They brought back more than just a victory. They brought back a queen. Mei Terumi's presence was a catalyst, transforming the raw, chaotic energy of Naruto's fledgling operation into something sharper, more focused. Where Anko saw networks of spies to be killed or turned, Mei saw webs of influence to be manipulated. Where Karen saw scientific data, Mei saw economic leverage. She walked through the cold, stone halls of the former hideout not as a guest, but as a master strategist surveying her new chessboard. Your resources are finite, Naruto-kun, she explained one afternoon, standing before a large map of the continent in the command center. She had traded her formal Kiri attire for a more practical, high-collared dark blue dress that was somehow just as commanding. Direct confrontation with the great nations is foolish. Attrition would destroy you, but their economies, they are brittle things. She tapped a finger on the land of iron. They monopolize the production of chakra-conductive steel. Their samurai are a nuisance. But their trade routes are their lifeblood. Anko-chan's contacts could disrupt their supply lines, create a shortage. We could then offer our own, superior materials, mined from Uzushio. Perhaps, at a premium. We don't fight their armies, we buy their loyalty, one empty treasury at a time. It was a new kind of warfare, one of politics and economics, and Naruto absorbed it with a voracious appetite. His vision was expanding beyond simply creating a powerful force. He was learning how to subtly cripple his enemies without throwing a single punch. Under Mei's tutelage, Shinsei began to evolve. It was no longer just a base. It was the nerve center of a shadow state in the making. Anko, meanwhile, was hunting. Armed with Mei's political intelligence and her own intimate knowledge of Root's inner workings, she was tracking the ghost who called himself Kajhane. He's not a ghost, he's a ghost story, she growled, slamming a file onto the table. Kajhane isn't his name, it's a title. He was Danzo's last apprentice, the one he was grooming to be his perfect successor. The file on him is practically empty. No family, no history. He's a blank slate, a Li Ving weapon forged for a single purpose, to protect Konoha from the shadows, by any means necessary. And he sees me as a threat to Konoha, Naruto finished. He sees you as a perversion of it, Anko corrected, her eyes glinting. You have immense power, but you've abandoned the village. You operate outside the cage's authority. In his mind, you're the ultimate rogue element, a cancer that must be cut out. And he's not stupid. He's not going to throw his forces at our front door. Her finger stabbed at a different point on the map, a remote location in the land of rivers. He's going to hit us here. It was a small, secondary research outpost they had established a month prior. After Orochimaru's main labs had been secured, Karen had identified several smaller facilities. This one had been dedicated to botany. She had repurposed it, staffing it with a few of Orochimaru's former researchers, men and women who were scientists first and Shinobi second, their loyalty secured through the PR. Omise of unrestricted research funding and a lack of moral oversight. They were studying the unique flora of the region, developing fast-growing plants with incredible regenerative properties, a prohei court that could eventually provide Shinsei with a limitless supply of medical supplies and nutrient-rich food. It's a soft target, Mei observed, her expression grim. Strategically vital for our long-term sustainability. But defended by only a handful of second-rate shinobi. He's planning a decapitation strike. It's a feint, Naruto said quietly, his eyes narrowed in thought. Anko looked at him, surprised. What makes you say that? Kajhane has been watching us. He knows about Karen's sensory abilities, Fu's speed, Chiyuya's genjutsu. He knows about me, Naruto reasoned. He knows that if he attacks a vital outpost, we will all respond. He's not trying to destroy the lab. He's trying to pull us onto the board. He's clearing a path to his real target. A cold dread settled in the room. Shinsei, Karen whispered, he's going to draw us out, then strike at the heart, Naruto confirmed. He wants the source code. Orochimaru's research. The vessel. He wants to turn our own weapons against us. His gaze hardened. And we're going to let him think he can. The rain fell in a ceaseless, dreary sheet over the land of rivers. The outpost, a series of interconnected domes built into a lush hillside, was already under siege when they arrived. Black-clad figures with blank, white masks moved through the trees like wraiths, their movements silent and coordinated. Explosive tags detonated against the lab's defensive barriers, the flashes of light momentarily illuminating the chaos. Naruto's team descended into the fray like a storm. Containment, Naruto ordered, his voice cutting through the din of battle. No survivors, no messengers. Fu was the first to strike. She shot into the sky, a green comet against the gray clouds, unleashing a massive cloud of her scale powder. It wasn't the sleep-inducing variant. This was a highly corrosive strain that ate through the root agent's masks and exposed skin, causing them to cry out in pain and confusion. Their greatest weapon, stealth, was rendered useless. Chiyuya landed on the roof of the main dome, her red hair a splash of defiant color in the gloom. She brought her flute to her lips, and a powerful, disorienting melody washed over the battlefield. The root shinobi faltered. The trees around them seemed to writhe and twist into monstrous shapes. The ground turned to swamp beneath their feet. Their comrades morphed into hideous beasts. It was chaos, perfectly orchestrated. Into that chaos plunged Anko and Mei. They fought with a terrifying, beautiful synergy. Anko was a whirlwind of precise, lethal strikes, her blades flashing in the gloom. Her movements a blur of deadly efficiency. Beside her, Mei was a force of nature. She exhaled a thick, clinging mist. Boil release. Skilled mist technique. The root agents who were caught in it didn't just burn. They dissolved, their bodies turning to steam and vapor. When others tried to attack from range, she spat globs of molten rock. Lava release. Lava globs. Karen stood near the entrance to the lab, her expression one of intense concentration. She wasn't fighting, she was conducting. Her sensory perception was spread over the entire battlefield, a three-dimensional web of chakra. Enko, 2 targets, high ground, your left, she yelled, not waiting for a response before her adamantine chains shot out, intercepting a volley of poisoned Senbon aimed at Mei's back. She was the nerve center, the queen on the chessboard, seeing every move and anticipating every threat. Naruto moved through the center of the battle, a calm eye in the hurricane. He engaged the enemy commander, a man wielding a pair of vicious-looking chakra blades. The fight was brutally short. Naruto didn't even use a jutsu. He simply outclassed the man in every conceivable way, disarming him disabling him with a series of precise strikes to his pressure points. He was about to interrogate the man when he felt it. A cold certainty. His sage mode was active, his senses heightened to their absolute peak. He could feel the ebb and flow of the battle, the life force of his friends, the fading chakra of his enemies. And he could feel a hole, a void where a presence should be. Karen, he yelled. Where is he? Karen's eyes snapped open, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple. I can't find him. Kuchihane, he's not here. His chakra signature isn't on the battlefield. She paused, her eyes widening in horror. Naruto, there's a signature back home. Small, suppressed, but moving fast. It's heading for the vault. He's already inside. The feint had worked perfectly. Kuchihane had used his emotionless, blank puppets to mask his own movements, slipping past even Karen's senses in the chaos of the main assault. He had drawn them all away. Finish this, Naruto ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerously low temperature. He looked at Mei, who gave a sharp, confident nod. They could handle this. Naruto closed his eyes. He reached out with his senses, searching for the IQ chakra signature of the three-pronged kunai he had left hidden deep within the stone of Shinsei's central command chamber. An application of his father's technique, perfected with his own Uzumaki sealing knowledge. He found it. With a silent, golden flash, he vanished from the rain-soaked battlefield. He reappeared in the familiar quiet of the command center. An alarm was blaring, a low, pulsing klaxon. The massive, sealed door to the main data vault, a marvel of Uzumaki engineering designed to withstand a tailed beast bomb, had been breached. Not with force, but with finesse. A complex counter seal, still glowing faintly, was etched onto its surface. Kuchihane hadn't just studied Danzo's techniques, he had studied their target. Naruto moved through the breach, his footsteps making no sound. He found Kuchihane in the heart of the vault, a cylindrical chamber where crystalline data storage pillars pulsed with a soft, blue light. Kuchihane stood before the central pillar, the one Kanta, eyeing all of Orochimaru's research on soul manipulation and the Edo Tensei, his hand outstretched, a black, rod-like device siphoning the data. He wore the standard root uniform, but his mask was different. It was stark white, with a single, stylized black wing painted over the right eye. He turned as Naruto entered, his posture relaxed, unconcerned. Uzumaki Naruto, Kuchihane said, his voice a filtered, emotionless monotone. You are faster than anticipated. But too late. It's never too late to crush a cockroach, Naruto replied, his body thrumming with Kurama's power, a faint orange aura beginning to glow around him. Such emotion, Kuchihane chided, retracting the data rod. It is your fatal flaw. The very thing Lord Danzo sought to purge from the shinobi of Konoha. Emotion breeds attachment. Attachment breeds weakness. Look at you. You rushed across a continent to save a glorified greenhouse, and in doing so, you left your heart exposed. He took a step forward, his movements utterly silent. I will use this knowledge to create an army that feels no pain, no fear, no misguided loyalty. An army of perfect soldiers to protect Konoha. Your creations, your harem, they will be the first to be reborn in my new order. Wind swirled around Kuchihane's hands. Wind release. Vacuum blade. He slashed his hand through the air, and an invisible, razor-sharp blade of wind shot towards Naruto. Naruto didn't dodge, he simply raised his own hand, and a miniature Rasengan, dense and powerful, spun to life in his palm. He met the vacuum blade head-on. The collision of jutsu created a deafening implosion of air, the shockwave cracking the data pillars around them. The battle was joined. Kajane was the epitome of Root's deadly art. His movements were economical, his attacks precise, each one aimed at a vital point. He flowed around Naruto's powerful blows, using vacuum spheres to deflect attacks and create momentary openings. He was a scalpel, trying to dissect a mountain. But Naruto was more than a mountain. He was an earthquake. He fought with a clarity and focus that transcended emotion. He saw Kajane's every move before it began, his sage mode predicting the flow of chakra, the tensing of muscles. "You talk of strength," Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm as he effortlessly parried a kunai strike aimed at his eye. "But you hide behind a mask and a borrowed philosophy." Danzo was a coward, afraid of a world he couldn't control. And so are you. As they fought, Naruto felt it. A subtle wrongness in Kajane's chakra. A dark, parasitic energy that clung to his soul, twisting it. When Naruto landed a glancing blow on his shoulder, Kajane's arm bent at an impossible, unnatural angle to absorb the impact, snapping back into place with a faint, dark purple flicker. The primordial entity. It was protecting its new pawn. "This power you have," Naruto said, his eyes glowing with a mixture of his own sage power and Kurama's crimson energy. "It's not yours. You're a puppet, just like the soldiers you sent to die for you. I am a vessel for a will stronger than any you can imagine." Kajane hissed, the first crack appearing in his emotionless facade. "Ill that will grant me the power to enforce true, lasting peace." He slammed his palm on the floor, and a cursed seal, different from Orochimaru's, black and jagged like a shard of obsidian, spread across the ground. From it, shadowy tendrils erupted, lashing out at Naruto. They weren't just physical, they radiated an aura of profound despair and decay. Naruto met them with his own will. A golden aura flared around him. "You don't want peace," he declared, his voice booming with power. "You want control, because you're terrified of the chaos of real life, of real emotions." He formed a massive Rasengan in his hand. Infused with nature energy, sage art, massive Rasengan. He didn't aim it at Kajane. He slammed it into the floor at his own feet. The entire chamber erupted. The floor shattered, the data pillars cracked, and the force of the blast sent Kajane flying. Naruto had overwhelmed the cursed seal with pure, untainted life energy. Kajane hit the far wall with a sickening crunch, his mask cracking. Naruto was on him in an instant, a truth-seeking orb forming in his hand, honed to a sharp blade. He pressed it against Kajane's throat. "It's over." Through the crack in his mask, Kajane's visible eye was wide with fear and disbelief. He had been so certain of his philosophy, of his strength. And he had been so utterly, completely dismantled. But before Naruto could deliver the final blow, the dark energy within Kajane flared violently. The space behind him seemed to tear open, not with the clean flash of a teleportation jutsu, but with a grotesque, ripping motion. A portal of swirling, chaotic shadow, smelling of ancient dust and nothingness, gaped open. Shadowy tendrils shot out, wrapping around Kajane's broken body and pulling him in. "This is not the end," his filtered voice rasped. Before he vanished into the tear, which snapped shut with a nauseating squelch. Naruto was left standing in the ruined vault, the silence broken only by the crackling of damaged electronics. He had won the battle, but his enemy had escaped, pulled away by a force he was only beginning to understand. He looked at the central data pillar, which Kajane had managed to partially drain. The enemy now had the knowledge to create his own undead army. And he was backed by a power that defied the laws of this world. He stood there for a long moment, the thrill of victory replaced by the cold weight of a much larger war. His family was safe. His home was secure, but the shadows were gathering, and they were learning. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Echoes of Uzushio. The silence in the ruined vault was a heavy, accusing thing. Kajane was gone, vanished into a tear in reality, but his presence lingered like a poison. The stolen data was a ticking time bomb, a promise of future horrors forged from Orochimaru's genius and a fanatic's zeal. Naruto stood amidst the wreckage, the adrenaline of battle fading into a cold, hard appraisal of their new reality. Shinsei was no longer a secret. It was a target. His team returned from the land of rivers less than an hour later, appearing via a reverse summoning jutsu Anko had prepared. They were grim-faced but unharmed. Root forces at the outpost had been systematically and permanently, dealt with. He got in, Anko stated, her eyes sweeping over the breached vault door. It wasn't a question. He had a counter seal keyed to my specific chakra signature. Naruto explained, his voice tight. He must have gathered the data during my fight with Pain, or sometime during the war. He planned this for a long time. Rin rushed to the damaged central pillar, her hands glowing with a soft green chakra as she assessed the information loss. He didn't get everything, she reported, a note of relief in her voice. It was a high-speed data siphon. He has the core theory of the Edo Tensei and soul anchoring, but he's missing the research on Hashirama's cells and the Zetsu cultivation methods. He can raise the dead, but they'll be the same flawed. Brittle puppets Kabuto used. Flawed puppets are still an army, Mei countered, her expression shrewd and calculating. An army of fallen Konoha heroes, perhaps. The psychological impact would be devastating. The strategic implications settled over them. Kajane wouldn't just be fighting them with bodies, he would be fighting them with memories, with ghosts. This base is compromised, Naruto said, his decision already firming in his mind. Kajane knows its location, its general layout. He'll be back, and next time he'll bring more than a feint. We need to move, all of us. We need a new home. A fortress. His gaze met Karen's, and the same thought passed between them. A place surrounded by natural defenses so powerful they had kept the world at bay for decades. A place that answered only to their blood. Uzushio. Karen breathed. It's more than a ruin, Naruto affirmed. It's the ultimate defensive position. We'll make it our capital. We'll rebuild it. We'll make the land of whirlpools the heart of Shinsei. Returning to Uzushio felt different this time. It wasn't a raid, it was a homecoming. As their boat navigated the treacherous, unnaturally violent whirlpools, Karen stood at the bow, her eyes closed. She wasn't just guiding them, she was listening. It's more than just seals in the water, she murmured, her hand resting on a swirling bow. RTEX of water that should have torn their boat to splinters, yet which parted harmlessly before them. The island, it's breathing. There's a pulse, a vast, dormant network of seals running through the bedrock like veins. They landed not on the beaches, but in a hidden cove that opened up behind a waterfall of saltwater, a path only Karen's senses could have found. The air inside was still an ancient. This was the true Uzushio. The parts the world had never seen. The temple archives were just the public library, Karen said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. She led them through a series of crumbling, vine-choked corridors. Her hand occasionally pressing against a wall covered in faded spirals. With each touch, the dormant seals in the stone would flicker with a soft, red light, acknowledging her presence. She was a key, unlocking a home she'd never known. She brought them to a dead end, a massive, unadorned wall of obsidian-like rock deep in the island's core. Here, she whispered, there's something on the other side. Not a room, a space, a quiet place. It feels like thousands of people holding their breath. Naruto placed his hand beside hers. He channeled his own chakra, raw and powerful, and felt the wall resist him. It wasn't a barrier of strength, but of complexity. A lock that required more than a key. It required a specific harmony. It needs more, Karen said, her brow furrowed in concentration. It needs a resonance only our bloodline possesses. This was a task for an Uzumaki. Naruto nodded to the others, who fanned out to secure the perimeter. He and Karen stood before the wall, side by side. Together, he said. They pressed their palms flat against the cold stone. Closing their eyes, they didn't push. They reached inward, syncing their chakra, their breathing, their very heartbeats. They let the essence of their clan flow from them, not as a jutsu, but as a statement of identity. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single, intricate red line appeared on the wall. Tracing a perfect spiral, it branched out, creating a dazzling, complex web of light that covered the entire surface. The wall did not grind open or slide away. It dissolved into a shimmering curtain of red energy. They stepped through and into another world. They stood on a balcony overlooking a vast, subterranean cavern. The ceiling was 100 meters up, studded with glowing, chakra-rich crystals that bathed the city below in a soft, permanent twilight. It was a city built in descending spiral terraces, a mirror of the clan's symbol, reaching down to a serene, mist-covered lake at its base. Intricate rope bridges connected the levels, and the architecture was a breathtaking blend of graceful curves and powerful, sealed structures. It was beautiful, ancient, and alive. Figures moved on the terraces below. Men, women, children, all with the telltale vibrant red hair of the Uzumaki clan. They hadn't all been killed. They had hidden. They had endured. An elderly woman, her long red hair woven into a single, elegant braid of silver and crimson, was waiting for them at the end of the balcony. She held a simple wooden staff, but her posture was regal, her dark eyes holding the weight of a long and painful history. "So," she said, her voice raspy but strong, "the outside world has finally found its way into the spiral heart." "We are Uzumaki," Karen said, her voice trembling slightly. It was a statement, a plea, and a question all at once. The elder's gaze was sharp, analytical. It lingered on Naruto, on the overwhelming power that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. It was a power she recognized, a power that had once brought destruction to her home. "You carry the beast your ancestors sealed," she noted, her tone laced with an old, deep-seated caution. "And you travel with outsiders. You bring the scent of war with you, child." "We bring the hope of a future," Naruto corrected her, his voice respectful but firm. He stepped forward. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My mother was Kushina. This is Karen Uzumaki. We didn't come to conquer. We came to reclaim our home." The elder, who introduced herself as Ashina, the matriarch of the surviving Uzumaki, led them down to the main terrace. The survivors gathered, their faces a mixture of fear, curiosity, and deep-seated suspicion. They were not warriors. Naruto could see that immediately. They were artisans, scholars, healers. Their hands were skilled with sealing brushes and weaving looms, not kunai. They had survived by preserving their culture, not their military might. "When Uzushio fell," Ashina explained, her voice a low murmur as they walked, "our ancestors activated the Great Seal of Concealment. It folded the inner city into a pocket dimension, a wrinkle in space, anchored to the island's bedrock. We have lived here for generations, hidden, silent. The outside world is a ghost story we tell our children, a tale of betrayal and destruction. Hiding is not living," Naruto argued gently. "It's waiting to die. The world is changing. New threats are rising, powers that could tear this sanctuary apart without ever knowing it's here. And you are one of those threats," a man from the crowd called out. His face etched with fear. "We saw the battle on the island weeks ago. We felt your power. It is the power that burns nations." This was the heart of the dilemma. He couldn't force them to join him. To do so would make him no better than Kido, or even Kachane. He had to earn their trust. But their fear was a wall as strong as the one they had hidden behind. The debate was interrupted by a high, piercing shriek from above. It wasn't human. One of the crystal clusters on the cavern ceiling shattered, raining down shards of light. From a dark, previously unnoticed fissure high up in the rock, monstrous creatures began to pour. They were grotesque, bat-like things, but their bodies were patched together with rusted metal plates and their eyes glowed with the malevolent red of active cursed seals. "Remnants!" a villager screamed in terror. "The daimyo's experiments." Fu, who had been silently observing from the balcony, took to the air instantly. They must have been nesting in the outer caves. Drawn by the commotion, they found a weak point in the rock. Before the Uzumaki could even react, Naruto's team moved. "Mei, seal the breach," Naruto commanded. "To Yuya, keep them off the civilians. Anko, Fu, thin their numbers. Karen, with me." Mei didn't hesitate. She leapt onto a higher terrace, her hands forming a rapid series of seals. Lava release. Scorch flow sealing jutsu. A torrent of molten rock shot from her mouth, not to attack, but to flow into the fissure, hardening into an impenetrable wall of volcanic glass. The creatures already inside, a swarm of about 50, dove towards the terrified villagers. Chiyuya landed in front of them, a defiant smirk on her face. She played a furious, high-pitched melody, and an invisible wall of pure sonic force erupted from her flute, stopping the swarm in its tracks. The creatures shrieked, disoriented, clawing at their own ears. Anko and Fu became blurs of motion, a dance of death in the air. Fu zipped between the beasts, her speed too great to track, leaving trails of scale powder that caused their wings to seize up. Anko used her summoning jutsu, and giant snakes erupted from the ground, SNA. Ching the faltering creatures from the air. But the true fight was for the heart of the city. Several of the creatures had broken through the initial defense, their cursed seals glowing as they charged the terrified Uzumaki. Ashina and the other elders tried to form a defensive line, but their combat skills were centuries out of practice. This was Karen's moment. She ran past them, placing herself between her people and the monsters. "I will not let you harm my family," she roared, and it was a sound of pure, unadulterated conviction. The adamantine sealing chains erupted from her back, not as whips, but as a shield. They formed a golden, shimmering dome over the civilians, the monstrous creatures slamming into it and being repelled by the pure, concentrated life force. But she didn't stop there. As she held the shield with one part of her will, she sent other chains shooting into the ground at her feet. They burrowed into the stone, glowing brighter and brighter as she poured her chakra into them. "The resonance seals are weak," she yelled to Naruto. "They haven't been maintained." She was reinforcing the city's ancient defenses, her own chakra a jump start for the dormant network. The faded seal patterns on the buildings and terraces began to glow with a renewed, vibrant red light. Naruto, seeing Karen's gambit, acted in concert. He created a dozen shadow clones, each one forming a Rasengan. They didn't attack the creatures. They slammed their attacks into the base of the city's central spire, not to destroy it, but to feed it. They poured their own vast chakra, amplified by Sage Mode, directly into the city's power source. The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. The entire subterranean city lit up like a star. Seals that had been dormant for decades blazed to life. A defensive grid of pure chakra formed over the entire cavern, incinerating the remaining creatures in a flash of silent, red light. The battle was over. In the ringing silence that followed, the Uzumaki survivors stared. Not at Naruto or his team, but at Karen. She stood, panting, her chains slowly receding, her face flushed with exertion. She had not been a weapon of destruction. She had been a guardian. She had used the power they feared to protect them, to mend the wounds of their home. Ashina walked slowly towards her, her old eyes filled with a new light. She reached out and took Karen's hand. "You have the will of our ancestors," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The will to create, to protect, to bind, not to sever." She then turned to Naruto. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, profound respect. "You have brought a daughter of Uzushio home. And you have shown us that power can be a shield, not just a sword. The spiral heart is yours to command, Naruto Uzumaki. You are the whirlpool's eye." Quote. Later, deep within the true archives, a library where scrolls floated in zero-gravity preservation fields, Ashina showed them their greatest treasure. It wasn't a jutsu. It was a theoretical treatise. The life's work of the first Uzukage. The seal of transcendent binding, Ashina explained. It was never completed. It was considered too dangerous. It is a formula, a framework for a seal that can bind anything. Not just chakra, but concepts. It can seal a soul to a body, as you have done. But it could also seal a flame to water, or a thought to a stone. Theoretically, it could even bind a god to the laws of mortality. Naruto took the scroll, his mind racing. This was it. This was the weapon he needed. Not a bomb, but a key. A way to face a threat like the Otsutsuki. Not by matching their power, but by rewriting their very existence. From his vantage point in the heavens, the Otsutsuki scout observed the sudden, massive flare of chakra from the island. His Byakugan pierced through the rock, through the dimensional barrier, and he saw it all. The hidden city, the reunification of the scattered Uzumaki clan. He saw the dormant seals of their ancestral home blaze back to life. Powered by the Jinchuriki, he had underestimated the situation. This was not merely a rogue shinobi gathering followers. This was the rebirth of the Uzumaki clan, a distant but potent branch of their own lineage, a people who held the secrets of the Sage of Six Paths in their very blood. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't just building an army. He was rebuilding a nation of rivals. The scout's impassive face finally hardened into a scowl of genuine concern. The plan to dismantle this threat piece by piece was too slow. The weed was not just growing, it was putting down roots in sacred soil. The time for observation was over. The time for judgment was at hand. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The unveiling of Shinsei. The air in the spiral heart of Uzushio no longer tasted of dust and dormancy. It hummed with the vibrant, thrumming energy of a beehive. Naruto's shadow clones, numbering in the thousands, were an endless river of orange and black, flowing through the ancient city with tireless purpose. They were not just rebuilding, they were reimagining. Under the guidance of the old Uzumaki artisans, they raised fallen spires, their architecture incorporating ceiling arrays that drew power from the very atmosphere. They cleared rubble not with brute force, but with delicate wind-style jutsu that separated stone from dust. The city was healing, its stone ones being knit back together with chakra and will. The integration of the two groups was a study in contrasts. Ashina, the ancient matriarch, spent her days with Karen in the Grand Archives, the two redheads hunched over glowing scrolls. The elder's hands, though wrinkled with age, moved with unerring grace, teaching Karen the subtle art of chakra calligraphy, the ability to weave intent and emotion into a sealed structure, transforming it from a mere formula into a piece of living art. Karen, in turn, explained the modern world's advances, showing Ashina how Orochimaru's data could be used to amplify their old techniques. Tayuya, surprisingly, had found a niche. The Uzumaki youth, who had never known a world outside their sanctuary, were utterly captivated by her abrasive personality and her demonic flute. She had become their unwilling, and brutally effective, combat instructor. Her training ground echoed with a mixture of foul-mouthed insults and the strange, discordant melodies of her genjutsu lessons. "No, you idiot," she'd snarl. "Don't just play the note, spit it. Make the air itself regret being in your way." Yet, the young Uzumaki adored her, their own latent, fiery Riss responding to her aggressive tutelage. Fu, meanwhile, was the city's heart. She was a flash of green and orange, delivering supplies to the highest terraces, challenging clones to races through the cavern, and organizing communal meals. She broke through the survivors, generations of ingrained suspicion with a smile and an earnest question, her simple, open-hearted nature a balm on their old wounds. She, who had been a pariah in her own village, was teaching a city of exiles how to be a community again. The command center was a new structure, built on the highest balcony overlooking the city. Its single vast window carved from a massive, clear chakra crystal. Inside, the mood was more sober. "It's time," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the map of the world projected onto a table of swirling mist. A piece of Uzumaki technology May had been delighted to discover. "We can't stay hidden forever. Hiding makes us look weak, like we're afraid. We need to announce our existence. On our own terms. A declaration of sovereignty," May said, her voice smooth and dangerous. She circled the map, a predator studying its hunting ground. "It needs to be more than a message. It needs to be a demonstration. Something so undeniable it forces them to take us seriously from the very first moment." "We could calm the whirlpools," Karen suggested. "Create a permanent, safe channel to the island. It would be a symbol of our control over the elements." "Too subtle," Anko countered from the corner where she was sharpening a trench knife. "They'll see it as a party trick. It needs to have teeth." Naruto looked out the crystal window. At the dark, stormy sea that surrounded their island fortress. "It will be both," he said, a plan coalescing in his mind. He turned back to the map. "It will be a warning, and an invitation." The world learned the name, Shinsei, on a perfectly clear, windless morning. It began with a tremor, not in the earth, but in the sea. Off the coast of the Land of Fire, fishermen watched in terrified awe as the notoriously impassable whirlpools of the Land of Whirlpools began to change. The churning, chaotic maelstrom that had sunk countless ships for centuries began to organize. The water itself seemed to bend to an unseen will. In the space of an hour, under the command of hundreds of Uzumaki, led by Naruto and Karen, the whirlpools rearranged themselves, forming a massive, concentric spiral. At its calm center, the island of Uzushio stood, no longer shrouded in a perpetual storm, but clear and visible under the morning sun. But that was only the beginning. From the heart of the island, a column of pure, red chakra erupted into the sky. It was not violent or destructive. It was controlled, precise. It climbed higher and higher, a beacon of impossible power, before spreading out in the upper atmosphere, forming a vast, intricate seal array in the sky itself. It was a perfect Uzumaki spiral, visible from as far away as Konoha's gates. A signature scrawled across the heavens. At the exact moment the seal in the sky stabilized, every cage, every daimyo, and every major media outlet in the world received a scroll. It appeared from a flash of light, delivered by a variant of the Flying Thunder God technique. On the scroll was a single, simple message, written in Naruto's own hand, but crafted with Mei's political genius. To the people of the Shinobi nations, the world you know is built on a fragile peace, a temporary truce in an endless cycle of hatred. You have been failed by a system that values nations over people, power over justice. The cycle will continue. The Akatsuki will be replaced by another shadow. The Fourth Great War will not be the last. But it does not have to be this way. Today, we declare the founding of a new nation. Shinsei, a nation not of land, but of will. Our home is Uzushiogakure, reborn. We offer a choice. To the missing nin hunted for crimes of survival. To the shinobi shackled by the will of corrupt masters. To the Jinchuriki, the Kekkei Genkei users, and all others who have been treated as weapons instead of people. To any who are disillusioned with the old ways, who dream of a world where strength is used to protect the innocent. Not to oppress the weak. Our gates are open. We are not your enemy. We are your alternative. But make no mistake, we are not asking for a seat at your table. We have built our own. The reaction was instantaneous, a political earthquake that shook the foundations of the shinobi world. In Konoha, the emergency cage summit was convened via video link, their face grim on the massive screen in the Hokage's office. This is an act of war. Darui, the Raikage, thundered, his voice crackling with static. He's openly recruiting our shinobi. He's trying to destabilize the entire world order. It's a power grab, plain and simple. Kuretsuchi, the Tsuchikage, snapped, her arms crossed defiantly. He's using his war hero status to build a personal army. We should crush them now, before they can gather strength. Chojuro, the Mizukage, looked pale and nervous. But, it's Naruto-kun. He wouldn't. He stammered, glancing off screen, clearly seeking guidance that wasn't there. Gaara of the Sand was silent, his expression thoughtful, troubled. All eyes turned to Kakashi. The sixth Hokage sat with his hands steepled, his single visible eye heavy with the weight of the situation. The Konoha elders, Homura and Kaharu, stood behind him, their faces masks of cold fury. Naruto is a shinobi of Konoha, Kaharu stated, her voice like cracking ice. He has abandoned his post, stolen clan secrets, and now declares himself the leader of a rogue state. He must be branded a traitor and listed in the bingo book for immediate capture or elimination. This, NSEI, is a haven for criminals and terrorists, Homura added. It is a second Akatsuki in the making, with a far more charismatic and powerful leader. We must act decisively. Kakashi finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the anger. And what do you propose we do, Kuretsuchi Dono? Launch an invasion of Uzushiogakure, an island that has been an impenetrable fortress for centuries, now inhabited by the full might of the Uzumaki clan and led by the single most powerful shinobi in the world. How many thousands of our own would we sacrifice in such a foolish assault? He looked at each of them in turn. Naruto has not attacked anyone. He has not threatened anyone. He has built a home and offered shelter. His methods are unorthodox, he said with masterful understatement. His message is one of hope for the downtrodden. If we respond to that with violence, what does that make us? How do we prove that our system is better than the one he offers? So we do nothing, Darui demanded. We just let him poach our shinobi and build a private empire. For now, Kakashi said, his gaze unwavering, we watch. We listen. And we strengthen our own villages, so that our shinob. I do not feel the need to seek shelter elsewhere. It was a masterful deflection, buying time he desperately needed. But he knew it was only a temporary solution. The wheels were already in motion. In a dark, subterranean cavern, illuminated by the eerie purple glow of cursed seals, Kajane stood before a freshly disturbed grave. The tombstone read, Torun Abarame. A loyal leaf, forever in the shadows. Kajane had the data, flawed, incomplete, but functional. He performed the hand signs, his movements precise and filled with a cold, hateful reverence. He slammed his palm on the ground. Edo Tensai. The ground cracked, and a coffin erupted from the earth. The lid fell away, and inside, a figure stood, its body covered in the gray, cracked texture of reanimated flesh. Its eyes opened, revealing the black sclera of the jutsu. Torun Aburame, formerly of Root, a master of the Aburame clan's poisonous nano-insects, looked down at his own hands, then at Kachane. Why? Torun's voice was a dry rasp. Why have you disturbed my rest? Your duty is not done, Torun, Kachane said, his filtered voice devoid of emotion. The leaf is threatened by a great traitor. Naruto Uzumaki has betrayed everything we stand for. He builds an army of freaks and outcasts to tear down the world we swore to protect. He held up a kunai with a suppressive seal tag. Your will is not your own. But your loyalty is. You will serve Konoha one last time. You will be the vanguard of my new route. The first of the loyal dead. Back on Uzushio, Mei was moving her own pieces across the board. In a secure communication room, she spoke into a device that transmitted her voice as a coded chakra pulse. Her contact was Tamari, Gaara's sister and Suna's ambassador. Of course, the Raikage's posturing is predictable, Mei said, her voice a confidential whisper. But you must ask yourself, Tamari-san, why is he so eager for war? Does he truly fear Naruto, or does he see a power vacuum? An opportunity for Kumo to expand its influence while the other nations are distracted. And Iwagakure, well, old habits die hard. They've always seen Konoha's strength as a threat. She was planting seeds of doubt, turfully turning the nation's own histories of mistrust against them, ensuring that a unified military front against Shinsei would be bogged down in a mire of political suspicion. The day ended on Uzushio. The great seal in the sky had faded as the sun set, but the island itself now glowed with a soft, internal light from the reactivated seals. A new, magnificent lighthouse, shaped like a spiral shell, cast a powerful, welcoming beam across the newly calmed waters. The nation of Shinsei was born. In the command center, Naruto stood with his inner circle. Chiyuya was uncharacteristically silent. Enko had a rare, genuine smile on her face. Karen was practically vibrating with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Fu was doing a happy little dance in the air. Mei simply raised a glass of sake she had produced from a storage scroll. To Shinsei, she said, her green eyes sparkling. May it never be boring. They had done it. They had put the world on notice. They were a power, a family, a home. They were ready for the consequences. But they were not ready for the response that was coming. Far beyond the sky, beyond the world, the Otsutsuki scout, whose name was Kinshiki, had seen the beacon. He had seen the declaration written in the heavens. This act of brazen defiance, this gathering of a potent bloodline, could no longer be tolerated. The harvest of this world could be jeopardized. He did not descend himself. That was beneath him. He looked to a smaller, more slender figure who had been meditating in the void beside him, a figure with a single, sharp horn protruding from his forehead and a rinnegan in his left palm. Arashiki, Kinshiki said, his voice a cold command that needed no air to travel. The primitives have built a nest. They wave their blasphemous power like a banner for all to see. It is an insult to the clan. Arashiki opened his eyes, a cruel, amused smile playing on his lips. They sound energetic. Shall I go and discipline them, senpai? No, Kinshiki said. You will send the herald. Let us see if their self-proclaimed god can withstand a divine test. Let the fear of the Otsutsuki be reintroduced to this forgotten garden. Arashiki's smile widened. He raised his hand, the rinnegan in his palm glowing with a malevolent, crimson light. He sliced it through the fabric of space, opening a shimmering, distorted portal. As you wish. From the portal, something stirred. A being of pure, white light and chilling, divine pressure. It was a messenger, a test, a judgment. And it was now heading for Earth. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The First Trial of Shinsei. The declaration was a stone cast into a still pond, and the ripples were immediate. Within a week, the newly calmed channel to Uzushiogakure saw its first arrivals. They were not an army, but a trickle of the desperate and the hopeful. A grizzled missing nin from the land of stone, his hands stained with blood but his eyes weary of a life on the run. A family of weavers from a minor nation whose daughter had manifested a minor but feared Kekkei Genkei, forcing them to flee their superstitious village. A former Kiri shinobi, loyal to Mei's ideals, who had grown tired of the new Mizukage's timid politics. They were a motley collection of the world's cast-offs. Shinsei welcomed them all. Each arrival was met not by a military officer, but by Fu. Her bright, disarming smile and genuine excitement immediately diffused the tension and fear in the newcomers. She would guide them to the Spiral Heart, where Karen would medically screen them and the Uzumaki elders would help them find housing and a role in the burgeoning city. A community was being forged, not from a shared history, but from a shared hope for the future. It was fragile, chaotic, and beautiful. The calm lasted for precisely 16 days. The warning came from both the old world and the new. Enko was the first to sense it, a flicker in the web of intelligence she monitored with obsessive vigilance. "Chatter," she announced, striding into the command center. "Back channels between the land of grass and the land of rivers are buzzing. Coordinated naval patrols. A shared military exercise, they're calling it. But they're amassing ships, and they're not talking to the 5 great nations about it." Almost simultaneously, Mei received a coded pulse from her contacts within Kurigakure. The smaller daimyos along the land of Fire Coast are hiring mercenaries at an alarming rate, she reported, her painted lips a thin, hard line. "They're spooked. They see our control of the whirlpools as a threat to their shipping lanes." The final piece of the puzzle came from Karen. She stood on the highest balcony of the command center, her eyes closed, her senses extended for leagues across the sea. "A fleet," she said, her voice strained. "Dozens of ships, sailing from 3 different directions. They plan to converge just beyond our territorial waters. They're trying to blockade us." Her eyes snapped open, a flicker of pained recognition in them. "And I feel his chakra among them. Faint, but unmistakable." Kido Sumiki. Naruto looked at the swirling mist map. 3 fleets, a pincer movement. A coalition, he stated. Too coordinated to be a coincidence. This has Kagehane's fingerprints all over it. He's using their fear and greed to do his dirty work. It's a test, Mei surmised, her strategic mind already dissecting the situation. They can't hope to match us in a direct confrontation. This is a probe. They want to see how we react, test our defenses, gauge our strength. Let's give them a reaction they won't forget, Chiyuya snarled. Cracking her knuckles, Naruto held up a hand. The time for reactive defense was over. "No," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority that silenced the room. "We will not be tested. We will make the statement. Ashina-sama, I want the city's primary defense seals brought to full power. Mei, you have command of the naval response. Enko, I want you and your Ost trusted Shinobi to be our invisible blade. Fu, Chiyuya, you're with me. We meet them head-on." He turned to a communications seal linked to the city's central plaza. His voice, amplified by the island's own chakra network, echoed through the Spiral Heart, reaching every new resident, every Uzumaki survivor. "People of Shinsei," he began, his voice calm, resolute. "For generations, the people of Uzushio hid from the world out of fear. Many of you came here seeking refuge from a world that hunted you. Today, that world has come to our shores. A fleet of cowards, manipulated by a man who lives in shadows, seeks to strangle our new home before it can draw its first breath." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Fear is a choice. Today, we choose to be fearless. We will not hide. We will not cower. We will show the nations the true meaning of the Uzumaki spirit. We will show them the strength of a people united not by blood or land, but by will. This is our home, and we will defend it." A roar went up from the city below, a sound of defiance from 100 different throats, all speaking with one voice. The crucible had begun. The enemy fleet was a grim sight on the horizon. A collection of brutish ironclads from the minor nations, their banners flapping arrogantly in the sea breeze. At the head of the fleet, on the bridge of a gaudy flagship, stood Kido Sumiki, his gentle smile replaced by a sneer of righteous fury. Beside him stood a silent, imposing figure in the cracked, gray skin of an Edo tensai. Torun Aburame. "They have not raised their defenses," Kido noted, peering through a spyglass. "The whirlpools remain calm. Arrogant fools. Hubris is the fool's companion," Torun rasped. His senses, enhanced by his reanimation, were already on high alert. Something felt wrong. Their answer came not from the island, but from the sea itself. The water around their fleet began to churn. Not with the chaos of the old whirlpools, but with a terrifying, organized violence. A dozen massive whirlpools, each hundreds of meters across, erupted into existence, forming a perfect, inescapable ring around the fleet. The ships were tossed like toys, their hulls groaning under the strain. "Report," Kido screamed, grabbing a railing to keep his balance. "Sir, the currents are tearing us apart. We're trapped." On the shores of Uzushio, Mei stood with a contingent of Uzumaki seal masters. She held her hands out, not forming a jutsu, but conducting. The seals woven into the island's foundation were her orchestra, the sea her instrument. A gift from the Uzumaki to all who would trespass, she murmured with a predatory smile. But Kajhane had planned for this. From the hold of several ships, massive, grotesque creatures were unleashed. They were horrifying amalgamations of sea life. Giant crabs with squid-like tentacles, their flesh covered in pulsating, black cursed seals. They were less living beings and more engines of chaotic power. They dove into the sea, their corrupted chakra disrupting the natural flow, and began to tear the whirlpools apart from below. At the same time, Torun Aburame stepped to the edge of the flagship. He placed his hands together. "Secret jutsu. Jar of poison," he whispered. An inky black cloud of his Rinkaichu, his nano-sized, venomous insects, poured from his body, spreading over the water. The insects began to devour the chakra in the seals, creating a dead zone in Mei's defenses. A single path through the maelstrom was opened. "Forward," Kido roared, "for the glory of grass." The fleet surged through the gap, heading for the beaches. This was the moment Naruto was waiting for. He stood on the prow of a sleek, high-speed Uzumaki vessel, Fu and Tayuya at his side. The ship shot out from a hidden cove, a sylve. Our arrow aimed at the heart of the enemy fleet. "Music, Tayuya," Naruto commanded. Tayuya grinned and brought her flute to her lips. She played a powerful, driving melody that rolled across the waves. It wasn't genjutsu. It was a sonic frequency that resonated with the very structure of the enemy ships. Rivets popped. Iron plates began to vibrate violently. The concentration of the enemy shinobi was shattered by the skull-rattling sound. Into that confusion, Fu attacked. She shot into the air, a blur of motion, her wings leaving a glittering trail. She swooped over the enemy decks, not attacking the men, but their siege weapons. Their cannonballs, their explosive tag supplies. Her scale powder, a highly volatile variant, coated them all. Naruto formed a single hand sign. Now, Tayuya played a final, explosive chord. The frequency shifted, acting as a detonator for Fu's scales. The entire enemy fleet was rocked by a series of secondary explosions, their own munitions turned against them. But as chaos reigned, one ship pushed through, its hull reinforced with dark, corrupted chakra. It slammed onto the beach of Uzushio. Ramps dropped, and soldiers poured out. They were not normal shinobi. Their eyes glowed with a feral, purple light. Jagged cursed seal patterns marred their skin. One of them, a large man from Kusa, roared, and his arm elongated into a grotesque whip of bone and sinew. Lashing out at the beach defenders, a line of nervous but determined Shinsei recruits. The invasion of the island had begun. The battle on the shore was a brutal, chaotic affair. The corrupted soldiers fought with a reckless abandon, their bodies twisting in unnatural ways, their jutsu laced with the same dark, parasitic energy Naruto had felt from Kajhane. But the people of Shinsei did not break. The ex-missing nin, fighting for the first home they'd had in years, met the charge with a desperate ferocity. The young Uzumaki, led by Tayuya, formed a secondary line, their newly learned Su ND jutsu and sealing chains creating a web of defense that slowed the enemy advance. From the cliffs above, Mei unleashed a torrent of lava, creating a wall of fire that channeled the invaders into a kill zone. Anko was a ghost in the chaos. She and her hand-picked team of former hunter nin moved through the battlefield, never engaging the corrupted grunts, but striking with lethal precision at their commanders, sowing confusion in their ranks. Kido and Torun finally made it to the shore, their goal clear, the spiral heart itself. The source of their power lies within the city, Torun rasped. Destroy it, and the island falls. They were met by Naruto. He landed on the sand before them, Kurama's chakra flaring around him like a crimson cloak. "Kido," Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. You were offered peace. You chose war. She was mine. Kido shrieked, his face contorted in a mask of obsession. You stole my goddess, my village's heart. I will tear down everything you have built. He charged, his body glowing with a sickly green chakra. Naruto met him with overwhelming force. The fight was a blur of motion, but it was utterly one-sided. Kido's jutsu, enhanced by Kagene's dark power, was wild and destructive, but Naruto moved through it, untouchable. He ended the fight not with a Rasengan, but with a single, precise chop to the back of Kido's neck, a display of contemptuous superiority. Kido crumpled to the sand, unconscious. Naruto turned to the last real threat. Torun Aburame, you were a loyal shinobi of Konoha. This is not a battle you should be fighting. My loyalty is to the leaf. Torun replied, his voice devoid of his own will, a mere puppet's echo. You are a traitor. You must be eradicated. A black swarm of nano-insects shot from Torun's body. A living cloud of death that consumed chakra and flesh. But Naruto was prepared. He flared his chakra cloak, the intense heat of the nine tails incinerating the first wave of insects. He then entered Sage mode. The natural energy around him forming a protective barrier. Your insects consume chakra, Naruto said, analyzing his opponent. But they are still living things. They cannot survive in a vacuum. He raised his hand. Wind release. Rasenshuriken. But he didn't throw it. He held the shrieking sphere of power, letting its microscopic wind blades create a vortex around him. The Rinkaichu were sucked in, shredded on a cellular level, unable to even get close. Seeing his primary weapon neutralized, Torun engaged in taijutsu, his fists coated in a concentrated sphere of insects, a touch from which would be fatal. It was a deadly dance on the sand, a clash of sage-enhanced reflexes against the cold, precise movements of the undead. Naruto saw his opening. He allowed Torun's fist to get close, then used a burst of chakra to propel himself backward, creating distance. As Torun lunged to follow, Naruto clapped his hands together. Sage art. Amphibian technique. He and Torun W. Air instantly reverse summoned to the bottom of the ocean just off the coast, a place of immense pressure and no air. The undead Torun was unaffected, but his insects, his living weapons, were instantly crushed by the pressure. A black cloud of dust in the water. Weaponless, Torun was just a corpse. Naruto, perfectly at home in the crushing depths, placed a sealing tag on the Edo Tensei's forehead. Rest in peace, he said, and the light faded from the puppet's eyes. With their leaders defeated and their corrupted soldiers being systematically dismantled, the invading forces broke. They tried to retreat to their remaining ships, only to find them swarmed by Anko's team and giant snakes. There was no escape. The first trial of Shinsei was over. Victory was not without cost. The beaches were scarred. The lower terraces of the city were damaged. And there were casualties. A grizzled ex-stone nin died protecting a young Uzumaki child. An Uzumaki elder fell while shielding a group of recruits. They had not been just soldiers. They were neighbors, friends. That evening, the entire city gathered in the central plaza. They lit lanterns, one for each of the fallen, and released them into the cavern's twilight sky. They floated upwards, a constellation of quiet grief and solemn respect. There were no speeches, no declarations of victory. There was only a shared, quiet understanding. They had bled together. They had fought for each other. They were no longer a collection of refugees. They were a nation. Naruto stood with his inner circle, watching the lanterns ascend. He had won. He had protected his people. But as he looked at the faces in the crowd, Uzumaki, ex-missing nin, civilians, all united in their shared loss and resolve, he felt the immense weight of his new crown. And miles away, in the dark, cold void of space, the herald arrived. It was not a being of flesh, but of solidified energy and divine law. It had no eyes, but it saw the flare of life and death on the blue planet below. It had no voice, but its purpose was absolute. It descended through the atmosphere, a silent, falling star of pure, white judgment, its destination locked, Uzushiogakure. The true trial was about to begin. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Divine Messenger. The victory celebration was a quiet affair, marked by the shared work of mending the city and its people. The scent of ozone and NT stone was slowly replaced by the aroma of medicinal herbs and the salty tang of the sea. A sense of shared identity, forged in the crucible of their first battle, had settled over the diverse population of Shinsei. They were no longer just refugees, they were citizens. They had defended their home, and in doing so, had truly made it their own. It was this newfound peace that made the wrongness, when it came, so jarring. Karen was the first to feel it. She was in the main infirmary, tending to a wounded ex-Kirinin, when a wave of vertigo washed over her. It wasn't a chakra signature. It was the opposite, a void, a hole punched in the fabric of the world's natural energy. It was a silence so profound it felt like a scream. "What is it?" a young Uzumaki healer asked, seeing the color drain from Karen's face. "Something's coming," Karen whispered, her eyes wide with a primal fear she hadn't felt since her days as Orochimaru's prisoner. Something that shouldn't be here. On the highest observation deck, Naruto was meeting with Ashina, discussing the integration of new arrivals, when he felt it too. His sage mode, which connected him to the life force of the entire island, suddenly recoiled. It was like putting his hand on a hot stove, but instead of heat, it was an absolute, conceptual nothingness. He looked to the sky. High in the stratosphere, a star was falling in the middle of the day. It wasn't burning, but it was intensely bright, a point of pure, sterile white light that grew larger with terrifying speed. It was not a meteor. It was descending with intelligent, controlled purpose. Alarms, ancient and new, began to blare across the spiral heart. The citizens, battle-hardened and vigilant, didn't panic. They moved with a practiced efficiency, civilians heading for the lower shelters. Shinobi taking up defensive positions along the city's terraces. The great chakra grid flickered to life over the cavern, a shimmering red shield. The herald did not land. It simply arrived. One moment it was a falling star, the next it was hovering silently 100 feet above the central plaza. It was not a person. It was a being of pure, geometric design, its form shifting between a vaguely humanoid shape and a complex, multi-faceted crystal. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth. It was composed of a hard, white light that did not radiate warmth, but instead seemed to absorb the color and sound from its surroundings. The vibrant red of the Uzumaki banners seemed to dull in its presence. The roar of the sea faded to a distant whisper. Naruto and his inner circle arrived in the plaza, looking up at the silent, impossible entity. "What in the hells is that thing?" Chiyuya breathed, her usual bravado replaced by a shocked disbelief. "Its chakra is, it isn't," Karen stammered, clutching her head. "It exists, but it has no life force. It's like a walking, empty jutsu formula." Then, a voice spoke, not in their ears, but directly in their minds. It was a voice of cold, perfect clarity, like the chime of a crystal bell in a vacuum. Less than statement. "You are the anomaly designated Naruto Uzumaki. Greater than. Who are you?" Naruto called out, his body already flaring with the golden light of the Nine Tails chakra mode. "What do you want?" "Less than designation. Herald. Purpose. To assess the unauthorized manipulation of life, death, and sacred energy on this world." "Greater than." The herald slowly turned its head, a featureless ovoid of light, towards Fu. "Less than observation. A tailed beast, improperly contained within a resurrected vessel. A blasphemy against the natural order." "Greater than." Its attention shifted to Naruto. "Less than observation. A Jinchuriki host, wielding the power of the sage without proper lineage or sanction. A corruption of a divine gift." "Greater than." "I don't know who you think you are," Naruto growled, his voice a low threat. "But you are not welcome here. This is my home, my nation. Leave now, or be removed." "Less than statement. Your concept of nation is irrelevant. Your home is a garden world, property of the Otsutsuki clan. You are a weed. The test is to determine if you must be pruned or completely uprooted. Begin assessment." "Greater than." The herald raised a single, crystalline arm. It didn't form a hand sign. It didn't gather chakra. It simply pointed. The space between its fingertip and Naruto warped, folding in on itself. Naruto's senses screamed. He didn't see an attack coming. He felt reality itself being rewritten around him. He flashed away with the Flying Thunder God technique, reappearing on a terrace 100 meters away. The spot where he had been standing no longer existed. A perfect, spherical hole had been carved out of the stone plaza, a hole that led to a swirling, star-filled void before it snapped shut. Everyone, back, Naruto roared. This was a different kind of enemy. This was a power on the level of Kagaya. He didn't wait. He formed a Rasenshuriken in his hand, the shriek of the wind jutsu, a cry of defiance against the unnatural silence. He hurled it with all his might. The attack, which could level a forest, flew towards the herald. The herald did not move. It did not raise a shield. As the Rasenshuriken approached, the jutsu simply unraveled. The intricate web of chakra that formed its structure dissolved into harmless, glittering particles. The shriek died, and the wind dissipated. It was as if the jutsu had never been cast. Naruto stared in disbelief. Less than analysis. A crude application of nature transformation. Inefficient. Grade. Failure. Greater than. Enraged, Naruto went on the offensive. He entered his Six Paths Sage mode, a truth-seeking orb forming in his hand as he hot towards the herald like a golden meteor. He thrust the orb forward, a weapon that could negate any ninjutsu, an absolute defense and offense. The herald raised its own hand, its fingers long and geometric. It met the truth-seeking orb. There was no explosion, no clash of power. The orb, an item of near-divine power, was simply stopped. It was held in place by a force that did not struggle against it, but simply denied its existence. Less than analysis. An attempt to manipulate the laws of creation. Unauthorized. Grade. Failure. Greater than. With a flick of its wrist, the herald sent Naruto tumbling back, his own truth-seeking orb flung away as if it were a child's toy. He landed hard, cracking the stone beneath him. This wasn't a fight. He was being graded. From the sidelines, his family watched in horror. They had seen him fight gods and win. Now, he was being dismantled. We have to help him. Fu cried, her cheerful demeanor gone, replaced by a fierce loyalty. Don't be a fool. What can we do? Chiyuya shot back, though her own hand was gripping her flute so tightly her knuckles were white. Mei's mind, always the strategist, raced. It nullifies ninjutsu. It's a conceptual opponent, but it has a physical form. We have to target it, not its abilities. She didn't wait for an answer. She leapt forward, her hands flying through seals. Lava release. Molten glob. A massive ball of superheated rock shot towards the herald. At the same time, Chiyuya raised her flute and unleashed a piercing wave of pure sonic force. Fu zipped into the air, releasing a cloud of her most corrosive scales. Anko AP. Paired from the shadows directly behind the herald, her blades coated in a potent, nerve-paralyzing poison. They attacked in perfect concert, a multi-pronged assault of physical and elemental fury. Less than observation. Coordinated but futile response from ancillary units. Greater than. The herald did not move. The lava dissolved into inert rock dust before it made contact. The sonic blast was absorbed into silence. Corrosive scales turned to harmless glitter. Anko's blades passed through the herald's body as if it were a hologram, and she stumbled, off balance, through the other side. The herald gestured dismissively. A wave of invisible force, a ripple in space-time, washed over them. All four women were sent flying, slammed into the surrounding buildings with enough force to shatter stone. They crumpled to the ground, not dead, but utterly incapacitated. No, Naruto roared, his form exploding into a full-tailed beast avatar. The massive, golden form of Kurama, glowing with Six Paths energy, materialized in the plaza. Its 9 tails lashing out. I'll tear you apart. He opened the avatar's mouth, gathering a massive amount of positive and negative chakra, forming a tailed beast bomb infused with sage art. It was the single most powerful destructive jutsu in his arsenal. Less than analysis. High-yield energy release. An inefficient use of a sacred life form. Grade. Failure. Greater than. The herald simply raised its palm. A small, black circle, like a pinprick of night, appeared before it. As Naruto fired the tailed beast bomb, the massive sphere of destructive energy flew towards the herald, struck the tiny black circle, and vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't get absorbed. It was just gone. Swallowed by a personal dimension, an application of space-time ninjutsu so advanced it made Obito's Kamui look like a parlor trick. The Kurama avatar stared in shock. Before Naruto could react, the herald appeared directly in front of the avatar's face, having moved without a flicker or sound. It placed its slender, crystalline hand on the Avatar's forehead. Less than verdict. The anomaly is a failure. The blasphemy is confirmed. The vessel is strong, but the will is unrefined. Eradication is not necessary at this time. Cleansing of the world will commence by a higher authority. You will serve as the herald of our arrival. You will be the fear that precedes our judgment. Greater than. Naruto felt a pain that was not physical. It was conceptual. The herald was not attacking his body, but his connection to his own power. The golden light of the Kurama avatar flickered, dimmed, and then dissolved, the massive construct collapsing back into Naruto's body. He felt his link to Kurama being temporarily severed, his access to Sage Mode choked off. He was left kneeling in the cratered plaza, his power sealed away, utterly spent, and completely helpless. The herald hovered over him for a moment, a silent, glowing monument to his absolute defeat. It had not come to fight. It had come to deliver a message. And it had succeeded. Less than assessment complete. Report filed. The divine judgment will follow. Greater than. With that final thought imposed on every mind in the city, the herald shot upwards into the sky. It did not fly. It simply ascended, faster than the eye could follow, and vanished in a silent flash of white light, leaving behind a cratered plaza, a city full of terrified citizens, and their defeated god king. Karen was the first to reach him, her hands glowing as she frantically tried to heal wounds that weren't there. The rest of his team, bruised and battered, gathered around him. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, his body trembling with a weakness he hadn't felt since he was a child. He was not physically broken. He was conceptually shattered. He had faced an opponent who played by different rules, an opponent for whom his greatest strengths were simply graded failures. He looked at the fear in his people's eyes, the damage to his home, the unconscious forms of his most loyal companions. The victory against Chiquito's fleet felt like a child's game now. He had picked a fight with the shinobi world, but he had attracted the attention of the gods. And he was not ready. He looked at the ruin of his city, at the family who had fought for him, at the people who had placed their hope in him. The despair was a cold, heavy weight in his gut. But beneath it, a single, hard spark of his old, defiant self ignited. It was not the bright, warm fire of his youth. It was a cold, sharp, and dangerously focused flame. He looked at Karen. Get everyone treated. Rebuild the plaza. Double the patrols. Then he turned to Anko, his eyes holding a chilling new resolve. Take me to the vault. The real one. The one even you were afraid to open. Anko's eyes widened. She knew the one he meant. A section of Orochimaru's archives so dangerous, so heretical, that the Sannin himself had sealed it behind a seal that would decay his own soul if he ever tried to open it. Naruto, what's in there is. I don't care. Naruto interrupted, his voice a low, flat whisper of absolute determination. He graded me. He called me a failure. A dangerous, predatory light entered his eyes. Class is now in session. And I'm going to teach these gods how to die. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Forbidden Archives. The silence left by the herald was heavier than any scream. It was a silence filled with the memory of absolute power and the promise of impending judgment. In the spiral heart, the physical damage was already being repaired by an army of shadow clones, their movements swift and efficient, but the psychological wound was deep. Hope, so recently forged in the fires of their first victory, had been chilled by a divine, indifferent dismissal. The citizens of Shinsei had seen their leader, their symbol of impossible strength, graded and failed like a clumsy academy student. Fear, cold and insidious, began to seep back into the cracks of their new home. Naruto felt it in the averted gazes, in the hushed whispers that ceased when he drew near. He was no longer just their leader, he was the focal point of their terror, the man who had brought the wrath of the heavens down upon them. He walked through the plaza, stone still scarred where reality itself had been scooped away, and his inner circle trailed behind him like a royal guard at a funeral. Their usual banter was gone, replaced by a grim, protective tension. He didn't speak until they were deep in the reclaimed Uzumaki archives, a place of quiet reverence. It wasn't a fight, he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. It was an audit, and we failed, Naruto. No one could have stood against that thing, Karen said, her voice fierce with a loyalty that defied the fear she so clearly felt. It wasn't playing by the rules of this world. Then we need to learn the new rules, Naruto replied, his gaze distant. He was looking past the ancient scrolls, past the glowing seals, towards a memory of a dark, cold place. Or write our own. He turned to Anko, and the cold resolve in his eyes made even the hardened former Anbu captain flinch. Take me there. The place Orochimaru was afraid of. Anko's face paled slightly beneath her tan. Naruto, you don't know what you're asking. Some things are sealed for a reason. He called it the chrysalis of the first sin. He believed the research in there was cursed. Not just dangerous, actively malevolent. We are past the point of fearing curses, Anko, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Take me. The journey took them away from the vibrant, living city of the Spiral Heart and back into the cold, dead stone of the original hideout. They descended flights of stairs that felt older, more primitive, than the rest of the facility, the air growing colder, smelling sterile ozone and something else, something that tasted like static electricity on the tongue. They stopped before a single, perfectly smooth wall of black, unidentifiable metal. There was no visible door, no lock, only a single, impossibly complex seal array etched into its center. It was a masterpiece of paranoia. The seal was an Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, designed to feed on any chakra that touched it, growing stronger with every attempt to breach it. Worse, it was keyed to Orochimaru's own soul. If he ever tried to open it, the feedback loop would shred his spiritual essence across dimensions. He built a prison and threw away his own key, Anko breathed, her hand hovering near the seal, recoiling as if from a physical heat. He built it to keep himself out, Karen corrected, her sensory perception allowing her to see the intricate, self-devouring pathways of the seal. But he didn't account for someone who could see the lock, the key, and the space between them all at once. Naruto stepped forward, Six Paths Sage mode flaring to life. His eyes were no longer just the vibrant blue of the hero, they were the golden, all-seeing eyes of a sage. He saw the seal not as a barrier, but as a complex equation, a logical paradox. He didn't push against it. He reached into it with his chakra, a touch as delicate as a surgeon's. He found the point where the serpent's head met its tail, the nexus of the loop. And he introduced a new variable. He channeled the pure, creative energy of the Six Paths Yang power into the mouth, and the absolute, negating void of the Six Paths Yin power into the tail. He fed the equation an answer that was both everything and nothing. The seal's perfect, self-consuming logic choked. It couldn't process the paradox. It shuddered, the glowing lines flickering violently. And then, with a sound like a breaking bone, it went dark. The black metal wall dissolved into dust, revealing a dark, cavernous laboratory beyond. The air that rolled out was ancient and cold. The lab was stark, dominated by a single, massive observation window that looked out into a swirling, contained vortex of pure, chaotic energy. But the true horror was on the walls. Not scrolls. Not data crystals. The walls were covered in slabs of preserved flesh from countless unknown creatures, intricate diagrams and panicked, scrawled equations carved directly into their skin. My God, May whispered, her usual composure cracking. This isn't a lab. It's the diary of a madman who stared into the abyss. Naruto ignored the grisly decorations and went straight to the central console. It was a single, large crystal, dormant and dark. As he placed his hand upon it, it flared to life, projecting a three-dimensional star chart into the center of the room. It was a map, but not of their solar system. It showed dozens of worlds, each marked with an Otsutsuki emblem. And each one was dead. Gray, lifeless husks. A recorded log, in Orochimaru's silky, dispassionate voice, began to play. Log entry 7342. The data recovered from the moon has confirmed my hypothesis. The Otsutsuki are not conquerors. They are cosmic gardeners, and their crop is life itself. They seed worlds, allow them to flourish, and then return to harvest the entire planet's chakra into a fruit, leaving a dead husk behind. They do not see us as sentient beings. They see us as a particularly vibrant field of wheat. Nearing harvest time, the star chart shifted, highlighting their own world in a vibrant, pulsing blue. Kagaya was not their leader. She was a tender of this garden who grew attached to her crop and betrayed her clan. Her actions did not save this world, they merely postponed the harvest. The herald that appeared in the old texts, the one that preceded the Jubi's first rampage, it was a surveyor. Assessing the crop's maturity. The one that appeared today, it was the same. A new survey. A final warning. The star chart zoomed out, revealing a vast, dark space between galaxies. A single, pulsating point of utter blackness was marked there. But my research into the origin of chakra, into the very fabric of existence, has revealed a terrifying, exhilarating truth, Orochimaru's voice continued. A hint of manic excitement creeping in. The Otsutsuki, for all their power to manipulate reality, are still part of that reality. They are a force of order, of creation. And every force has an equal and opposite reaction. I have found evidence of their predator. The projection changed, showing not a being, but a simulation of spreading, cancerous darkness. It has no name that our tongues can pronounce. I have come to call it the Great Unraveling. It is not a creature of chakra. It is a being of pure entropy. It does not consume life, it consumes existence itself. It is a force of anti-creation. A cancer to the Otsutsuki's ordered reality. They did not defeat it in the ancient past. The records suggest they couldn't. They merely sealed it away, quarantining the entire galaxy where it manifested. A quarantine Kagaya breached when she fled to this solar system. The projection focused on Earth again. A faint, dormant signal pulsed from deep within the planet's core. The seal is here, deep within the planet, weakened by Kagaya's meddling. The dark energy I have studied, the power that now infests Danzo's successor, it is a leak. A sliver of the unraveling's influence, seeping into our world. The recording ended. The room was plunged into a heavy, horrified silence. They were not just facing a powerful alien clan. They were living on top of a prison for a cosmic horror. And their enemies were the jailers. So that's the choice, Anko said, her voice a harsh rasp. We get eaten by the space gods, or we unleash Cthulhu from the basement and hope it eats them first. It's no choice at all, Karen said, shaking her head, her face pale. This, unraveling, it's anti-life. To use it would be to destroy everything we're fighting for. But it's a weapon, Yuya argued. Her pragmatism overriding her fear. The only thing we've seen that these white-faced bastards are actually afraid of. A weapon you cannot aim as a suicide pact, May countered. Her mind racing through the strategic impossibilities. Unleashing that thing would be the ultimate scorched earth tactic. They argued, their voices a cacophony of fear, pragmatism, and morality. But Naruto was silent. He walked over to the vortex, the contained sample of the unraveling's energy that Orochimaru had managed to capture. It was a swirling chaos of nothingness, a storm that devoured the light. He stared into it, and for the first time, he did not see an enemy. He saw a concept. He remembered the herald, how it had unraveled his Rasenshuriken. It had not blocked it had deconstructed it, turning a complex jutsu back into simple, harmless chakra. The Otsutsuki power was to manipulate the laws of reality. The unraveling's power was to erase them. He reached into AP. Ouchin pulled out the scroll Ashina had given him. The theoretical formula for the seal of transcendent binding. A seal that could bind a thought to a stone, or a god to the laws of mortality. He finally spoke, his voice cutting through the argument with the chilling clarity of a man who has seen the only path forward. We're not going to unleash it, he said, turning to face them, his eyes blazing with a terrifying new intelligence. We're going to steal from it. He held up the scroll. The herald wasn't a being, it was a living jutsu. The Otsutsuki are not gods, they are cosmic programmers. And their power is the source code of reality. We can't fight them on that level. But this, he pointed to the swirling vortex, this is a virus. An eraser. It's the delete key for their entire operating system. He laid the scroll on the console, its ancient paper a stark contrast to the alien technology. Orochimaru was a genius, but he thought like a scientist, trying to understand it. Ashina's ancestors were artists, trying to bind it. I will be both. He looked at his horrified, awestruck family. I'm not going to learn a new jutsu. I'm going to create one. I will use Uzumaki sealing arts as the framework. Orochimaru's research is the language, and the concept of that thing's power is the verb. I will create a seal that doesn't control or destroy chakra. I will create a seal that unmakes it. He was no longer the hero of the leaf. He was no longer just the leader of Shinsei. He was becoming something new. A fusion of the sage's wisdom, the scientist's heresy, and the sealer's art. A man who, having been humbled by gods, had decided to learn the language of the abyss in order to tear them down from their thrones. He placed his hand on the console, a complex, glowing array of seals spreading from his fingertips. Interacting with Orochimaru's work, the herald gave me a failing grade, he whispered, a cold, dangerous smile touching his lips for the first time since his defeat. I'm about to return the favor. Chapter 9 End.